For more than 4,500 years, the pyramids of Egypt have stood against the desert sky, silent witnesses to the passage of empires and the endless human quest to understand what came before us. They are the last surviving wonder of the ancient world, and perhaps the most enigmatic. Tonight we'll explore these mysteries through the careful work of archaeologists, engineers, and historians who have dedicated their lives to understanding these structures. We'll examine ancient papyrus scrolls detailing construction workers' villages, revealing the human story, and scanning technologies, uncovering hidden chambers. This is a story of ambition and faith of a civilization that marshaled thousands of workers through shared vision rather than slavery. We'll move carefully through this history, taking time to understand not just what was built, but how and why. We'll examine evidence thoughtfully and acknowledge what remains unknown. Tonight's journey takes us from Pharaoh Khufu's vision to the quarries that supplied millions of stone blocks. We'll meet the skilled workers who built these monuments and explore engineering mysteries that puzzle us still. We'll discover astronomical precision in the pyramid's design and venture inside to chambers whose purposes provoke debate. We'll learn about mysterious shafts blocked by stone doors and the massive void discovered in 2017, hidden for millennia, its purpose unknown. We'll examine the legend of the Pharaoh's curse and address theories about extraterrestrial involvement. Finally, we'll explore the latest discoveries reshaping our understanding and consider what mysteries remain. Let's begin. The first stones. In the year 2580 before the Common Era, a young man ascended to the throne of Egypt with a vision that would define not only his reign, but the very image of ancient civilization for millennia to come. His name was Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, and he was the second pharaoh of Egypt's fourth dynasty. His father Sneferu had been a prolific builder, constructing 3 major pyramids during his reign. But what Khufu envisioned would surpass anything that had come before, a monument so vast, so precisely engineered, that it would stand as the tallest human-made structure on Earth for more than 3,800 years. The decision to build what we now call the Great Pyramid was not made lightly, nor was it made quickly. Archaeological evidence suggests that the planning phase alone took several years. Khufu needed to choose a location that would serve multiple purposes. It had to be visible from great distances, establishing the pharaoh's power across the landscape. It needed solid bedrock, capable of supporting millions of tons of stone. And it required proximity to the Nile River for transportation of materials, yet had to be high enough to avoid the annual floods that brought life to Egypt's farmlands. The site Khufu selected was the Giza Plateau, a limestone formation on the west bank of the Nile, approximately 15 kilometers from the ancient capital of Memphis. The choice was strategic in every sense. The plateau's bedrock was solid and level, a natural foundation that would prove crucial for the pyramid's stability. The location offered a commanding view of the Nile Valley, visible from both the river and the surrounding settlements. And perhaps most importantly, from a religious perspective, it lay on the western bank, the direction of the setting sun, which in Egyptian cosmology represented the realm of the dead. What we know about the early planning stages comes from several sources. Archaeological surveys of the Giza Plateau have revealed evidence of extensive preliminary work test pits dug to assess the bedrock leveling operations, to create a perfectly flat base and the establishment of a temporary settlement for the workers who would carry out these preparations. The precision required for this initial phase was extraordinary. Modern surveys have shown that the base of the Great Pyramid is level to within just 2 centimeters across its entire area, a remarkable achievement, considering the base covers more than 5 hectares. The organizational challenge was immense. Khufu needed to mobilize resources from across his kingdom: limestone from local quarries, granite from Aswan, 800 kilometers, to the South copper tools from the Sinai and food supplies to feed thousands of workers. He needed architects capable of translating his vision into buildable plans, engineers who understood the mathematics of load-bearing and stability, and administrators who could coordinate the logistics of what would become perhaps the largest construction project in human history up to that point. At the head of this enterprise was a man named Hemiunu, who bore the title of vizier and overseer of all the king's works. Hemiunu was not merely an administrator. He was Khufu's nephew, a member of the royal family, which speaks to the importance placed on this project. A statue of Hemiunu discovered in his mastaba tomb near the Great Pyramid shows a heavy-set man with an expression of calm authority. The inscriptions in his tomb list his many titles and responsibilities, making clear that he was the chief architect of Khufu's pyramid. Recent discoveries have given us unprecedented insight into how this project was organized. In 2013, archaeologist Pierre Talla announced the discovery of ancient papyrus scrolls in a cave system at Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast. These papyri dating to the 27th year of Khufu's reign include the logbook of an official named Merer, who was responsible for a team of workers transporting limestone blocks from the Tura quarries to Giza. The Diary of Merer, as it's now known, is the oldest papyrus ever found and provides a day-by-day account of the logistics involved in pyramid construction. Merer's diary describes a sophisticated system of organization. His team consisted of approximately 200 men, divided into smaller units with specific responsibilities. They transported stones by boat during the Nile's inundation season, when the river's waters rose high enough to reach artificial harbors constructed near the pyramid site. The diary mentions a canal system that brought boats to within a few hundred meters of the construction site, solving one of the great logistical challenges of the project. But logistics and organization, impressive as they were, represent only part of the story. The pyramid that Khufu envisioned would require approximately 2.3 million stone blocks with an average weight of 2.5 tons each. Some blocks, particularly the granite beams used in the internal chambers, would weigh as much as 80 tons. The finished pyramid would rise to a height of 146 meters, roughly equivalent to a modern 40-story building, and would contain enough stone to build a wall around France. The question that has fascinated researchers for centuries is this: how did a civilization without iron tools, without the wheel for transport, without pulleys or cranes, as we understand them, conceive of such a project? The answer lies partly in the gradual accumulation of knowledge and experience. Khufu's father, Sneferu, had built 3 pyramids each, representing an advance in engineering and construction techniques. The bent pyramid at Dashur shows evidence of a mid-construction design change, suggesting that ancient engineers were learning and adapting as they built. The red pyramid, also built by Sneferu, successfully achieved a true pyramid shape and demonstrated that such massive structures could be stable. Khufu inherited this knowledge, but he also inherited something equally important: a stable, prosperous kingdom, with the resources and organizational capacity to undertake such a project. Egypt during the 4th dynasty was at the height of its old kingdom power. The country was unified, trade routes were secure, and the pharaoh's authority was absolute. The construction of the Great Pyramid was not just an architectural project. It was a demonstration of state power, a religious statement about the pharaoh's divine nature, and an economic enterprise that would employ thousands of people for more than 2 decades. The religious significance cannot be overstated. In ancient Egyptian belief, the pharaoh was not merely a king, but a living god, the earthly embodiment of Horus, and after death identified with Osiris. The pyramid was not simply a tomb, but a machine for resurrection, a structure that would enable the pharaoh's K, his life force, to ascend to the heavens and join the eternal stars. Every aspect of the pyramid's design reflected this religious purpose, from its alignment with the cardinal directions to the orientation of its internal passages towards specific stars. The astronomical precision built into the pyramid's design reveals the sophistication of Egyptian knowledge. The four sides of the pyramid face almost exactly north, southeast, and west, with an error of only 3/60ths of a degree. Achieving this precision required careful observation of the stars. Researchers believe the ancient Egyptians used the stars to establish true north, possibly by observing the circular path of stars around the celestial pole and marking the midpoint of that circle. As construction began probably around 2580 BCE, the Giza Plateau was transformed. What had been a relatively empty expanse of limestone bedrock became a massive construction site with workers' settlements, supply depots, workshops for tool production, and the infrastructure needed to support thousands of people. The scale of organization required was unprecedented. Workers needed to be housed, fed, clothed, and provided with medical care. Tools needed to be manufactured, maintained, and replaced. Materials needed to be quarried, transported, and precisely placed. All of this required not just labor, but coordination, planning, and a level of administrative sophistication that speaks to the capabilities of the ancient Egyptian state. The vision that drove all of this was Khufu's, but it was a vision shaped by his culture, his religious beliefs, and the accumulated knowledge of his civilization. He was not building merely for himself, but for Egypt, for the gods, and for eternity. The pyramid would be his legacy, the physical manifestation of his power and his piety, a structure that would endure long after his name was forgotten by common people, but would continue to inspire awe in all who saw it. What Khufu could not have known was just how enduring his monument would prove to be. More than 4,500 years later, the Great Pyramid still stands weathered but intact, the last surviving wonder of the ancient world. It has outlasted the civilization that built it, outlasted the languages in which its builders spoke, outlasted the religions they practiced. And it continues to pose questions to challenge our understanding and to remind us of what human beings can achieve when vision, knowledge, and determination align. The decision to build the Great Pyramid was about power, certainly the power of a god-king to command the resources of an entire nation. But it was also about faith, about the belief that through monumental construction, through precision and dedication, the boundary between earth and heaven could be bridged. And it was about legacy, about creating something that would speak across the ages, long after the voices of its creators had fallen silent. The Secret of Limestone. We've seen how Khufu conceived his great monument. Now let's explore the raw materials that would make his vision real. Standing before the Great Pyramid today, visitors often focus on its scale, its geometry, its alignment with the stars. But the pyramid's most fundamental mystery begins with something more basic, the stone itself. 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite, each carefully shaped and positioned together, weighing approximately 6 million tons. For centuries, scholars and travelers wondered where these massive stones came from, and how ancient workers managed to cut, transport, and place them with such precision. The answer, as archaeological research has revealed, is more complex than a single quarry or a single method. The Great Pyramid is in essence a monument built from multiple sources, each presenting its own logistical and technical challenges. The majority of the pyramid's mass, the core blocks that form its interior, came from limestone, quarried directly on the Giza Plateau itself. Geological surveys conducted throughout the 20th century identified ancient quarry sites located to the south and southeast of the pyramid, some less than 400 meters from the construction site. These quarries are still visible today, appearing as large depressions in the plateau's surface, their walls bearing the distinctive marks of ancient extraction techniques. When archaeologists examined these quarry sites more closely, they found evidence of the methods used to extract the stone. The limestone of the Giza Plateau is relatively soft when first exposed to air, a quality that made it easier to work with copper and stone tools. Workers would identify natural fissures in the rock and exploit them using copper chisels to cut channels around blocks of the desired size. Wooden wedges driven into these channels and then soaked with water would expand and help split the stone along predetermined lines. The evidence for this technique comes not just from the quarry walls themselves, but from copper tools found at the site, their edges worn from repeated use against stone. The proximity of these quarries to the construction site solved one major logistical problem. The core blocks, which make up roughly 85% of the pyramid's volume, needed to be moved only a few hundred meters. Nevertheless, moving blocks averaging 2.5 tons each, even over short distances, required organization and technique. Archaeological evidence suggests the use of wooden sledges, which workers would drag across paths made smoother by wetting the sand, a technique depicted in ancient Egyptian tomb paintings and confirmed by modern experiments. But the core blocks tell only part of the story. The pyramid's outer casing, the smooth white limestone that once covered the entire structure, came from quarries at Tura, located on the east bank of the Nile, approximately 13 kilometers from Giza. Tura limestone is finer grained and whiter than the Giza stone, capable of being polished to a brilliant finish. In ancient times, when the casing was intact, the pyramid would have gleamed in the Egyptian sun, visible from great distances across the desert. The Tura quarries present a different set of challenges. The stone had to be transported across the Nile and then moved to the construction site. This is where the river became crucial to the pyramid's construction. During the annual inundation, when the Nile's waters rose with the summer floods, boats could navigate closer to both the quarries and the construction site. Evidence of ancient harbors and canal systems near the pyramid suggests that water transport brought materials to within a few hundred meters of where they would be used. Yet even the Tura limestone pales in comparison to the logistical challenge presented by the granite used in the pyramid's internal chambers. This red granite came from quarries near Aswan, more than 800 kilometers to the south. Some of these granite blocks weigh as much as 80 tons, equivalent to about 60 modern automobiles. How such massive stones were transported over such distances remained one of Egyptology's enduring mysteries until a remarkable discovery in 2013. That year, French Egyptologist Pierre Talla and his team were excavating at Wadi al-Jarf, an ancient harbor site on the Red Sea coast. Among the artifacts they uncovered were several papyrus scrolls remarkably well preserved in the dry desert environment. These papyri, dating to the 27th year of Khufu's reign, contained the daily logbook of an official named Merer, who supervised a team of workers responsible for transporting stone from Tura to Giza. The Diary of Merer, as it came to be known, provides an unprecedented window into the logistics of pyramid construction. Merer describes his team's work in matter-of-fact detail: the loading of stones onto boats, the journey up the Nile, the delivery of materials to the pyramid site. He mentions a system of artificial waterways that allowed boats to approach the construction area during the flood season. The diary also references a place called the Horizon of Khufu, believed to be the pyramid itself, and describes the delivery of limestone blocks to this location. What makes Merer's diary particularly valuable is its confirmation of what researchers had long suspected, that the ancient Egyptians used the Nile's annual flood cycle as a natural transportation system. During the 3 to 4 months when the river ran high, boats could navigate channels that would be impassable during the rest of the year. This seasonal rhythm would have dictated the pace of construction, with different types of work performed during different times of the year. The diary also reveals the scale of organization involved. Merer's team consisted of approximately 200 men, divided into smaller units with specific responsibilities. This was just one team among many, all coordinated to ensure a steady supply of materials to the construction site. The level of administrative sophistication required to manage such an operation speaks to the capabilities of the Old Kingdom Egyptian state. But having the stones at the construction site was only the beginning. They still needed to be shaped with precision and fitted together. This is where the technical skill of ancient Egyptian stoneworkers becomes most apparent and most mysterious. Modern measurements of the Great Pyramid reveal tolerances that seem almost impossible for a civilization working with copper tools. The blocks fit together so tightly that in many places a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. The pyramid's base is level to within 2 centimeters across an area of more than 5 hectares. The sides are straight to within a few centimeters over a length of more than 230 meters. How was such precision achieved? The evidence suggests multiple techniques working in combination. For the softer limestone, copper saws and chisels would have been effective, especially when used with an abrasive, such as quartz sand. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that copper tools regularly resharpened and used with sand as a cutting agent can indeed cut limestone with reasonable efficiency. The granite presents a greater challenge. Granite is much harder than limestone, hard enough that copper tools alone would be largely ineffective. Researchers have proposed several possibilities. One theory suggests the use of dolerite pounders, balls of an extremely hard stone found in the Egyptian desert, to pound and pulverize the granite surface. Evidence of this technique has been found at the Aswan quarries, where dolerite pounders lie scattered among the ancient workings. Another theory, more controversial, proposes that the Egyptians may have had some method of softening stone, perhaps through the application of certain minerals or organic compounds. Proponents point to ancient texts that mention mysterious substances used in stone working, though no definitive evidence of such techniques has been found. The mainstream archaeological community remains skeptical of this theory, noting that known techniques, while labor-intensive, were sufficient to achieve the observed results. What is clear is that shaping and fitting the stones required not just tools but skill, the kind of expertise that comes from years of training and practice. The workers who cut and placed these stones were craftsmen, not unskilled laborers. Evidence from workers' settlements near the pyramid suggests a hierarchical organization, with experienced stonemasons supervising teams of less skilled workers. The precision of the stonework also required sophisticated measuring and leveling techniques. The ancient Egyptians had developed tools for this purpose: plumb bobs for establishing vertical lines, wooden set squares for right angles, and leveling instruments that used water to establish horizontal planes. But tools alone don't explain the accuracy achieved. That required careful planning, constant checking and rechecking, and a culture that valued precision in craftsmanship. Each stone in the Great Pyramid represents multiple stages of work: quarrying, rough shaping, transport, fine shaping, and final placement. Multiply this by 2.3 million blocks, and the scale of the undertaking becomes clear. This was not just construction. It was an industrial operation requiring coordination across multiple sites, management of thousands of workers, and maintenance of quality standards over more than 2 decades. The stones of the Great Pyramid tell a story of human organization, technical skill, and persistence. They speak to a civilization that had developed sophisticated methods for working with stone, for moving massive weights, for achieving precision with simple tools. But they also remind us of how much we still don't fully understand. The exact techniques used to cut the hardest stones, the methods for achieving such tight fits between blocks, the systems for ensuring accuracy across such a massive structure, these remain subjects of ongoing research and debate. Modern engineers examining the pyramid with contemporary tools and knowledge express respect for the achievements of their ancient counterparts. The precision of the stonework achieved without modern measuring instruments or power tools represents a level of skill and dedication that transcends the millennia, separating us from the builders. Each carefully shaped and positioned block stands as a testament to human capability, to what can be achieved through knowledge organization and the patient application of skill. Construction army. We've explored the stones themselves and where they came from. Now let's meet the people who moved them, shaped them, and built one of history's greatest monuments. For much of modern history, the popular imagination has pictured the construction of the pyramids in a particular way, thousands of enslaved people whipped and beaten, dragging massive stones across the desert under the merciless Egyptian sun. This image has been reinforced by Hollywood films, biblical interpretations, and even the accounts of ancient Greek historians who visited Egypt more than 2,000 years after the pyramids were built. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, described 100,000 men working in 3-month shifts, a figure that has echoed through history, despite having no contemporary Egyptian source to support it. The truth, as archaeological evidence has revealed over the past 3 decades, is quite different, and in many ways more remarkable. The transformation in our understanding began in the early 1990s, when archaeologists Mark Lehner and Zahe Hawass initiated systematic excavations of the area south of the Sphinx and the pyramids. What they discovered there would fundamentally change how we think about the pyramid builders. Buried beneath centuries of sand and debris were the remains of a substantial settlement, a workers' city that housed, fed, and cared for the people who built Khufu's pyramid. The site, which archaeologists came to call Hayt el Ghurab, or the Wall of the Crow, covered an area of approximately 6 hectares. The structures uncovered there tell a story of organization and planning on a massive scale. There were long barracks-style buildings that could house hundreds of workers arranged in orderly rows. There were bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread daily. There were copper workshops where tools were manufactured and repaired. There were administrative buildings where the complex logistics of the construction project were managed. What makes these discoveries particularly significant is what they reveal about the status and treatment of the workers. The evidence consistently points not to slavery, but to a system of organized labor, likely combining permanent skilled workers with rotating crews of seasonal laborers. The dietary evidence is particularly telling. Archaeological analysis of animal bones found at the site reveals that the workers consumed significant quantities of meat, primarily beef, but also sheep, goat, and fish. The bones show butchering patterns consistent with systematic food distribution, not the scraps that might be given to enslaved people. Researchers estimate that several cattle were slaughtered daily to feed the workforce, along with numerous sheep and goats. This represents a diet substantially richer in protein than what most ancient Egyptians would have consumed regularly. The workers also had access to beer, a staple of the ancient Egyptian diet that provided both nutrition and hydration. Evidence of large-scale brewing operations has been found at the site, with facilities capable of producing hundreds of liters daily. Bread and beer together formed the foundation of the workers' diet, supplemented by the meat, fish, and likely vegetables and legumes, though these leave less archaeological trace. This level of provisioning required substantial resources and organization. Cattle had to be raised, transported, and slaughtered. Grain had to be grown, harvested, stored, and processed into bread and beer. Fish had to be caught and distributed. The logistics of feeding thousands of workers daily represents an administrative achievement nearly as impressive as the construction itself. The physical remains of the workers themselves provide additional insights. Skeletal analysis of burials near the pyramid reveals several important patterns. Many of the individuals show signs of heavy physical labor, thickened bones, arthritis in joints, subjected to repetitive stress, and healed fractures. These are the marks of hard work, certainly, but they also tell another story. The fractures show evidence of having been set and treated, often quite skillfully. Some individuals survived injuries that would have been debilitating without medical care. This evidence points to the existence of a medical system that cared for injured workers. In a society that viewed workers as disposable slaves, such care would be unlikely. Instead, it suggests that these workers were valued their skills, and labor were important enough that efforts were made to heal them and return them to work. Another fascinating discovery came from the stones themselves. On many of the blocks used in the pyramid's construction, archaeologists found graffiti marks left by the work gangs who quarried, transported, or placed the stones. These inscriptions, written in hieratic script, include the names of work teams, the followers of the powerful white crown of Khufu, the companions of Khufu, the drunkards of Menkaure. These names suggest not oppressed slaves, but organized teams with distinct identities, and notably a sense of pride in their work. The organization of labor appears to have been hierarchical and sophisticated. Evidence suggests a system of files, large divisions of workers, each subdivided into smaller teams. This structure allowed for efficient management of thousands of workers with clear chains of command and specific responsibilities assigned to each group. The graffiti suggests a degree of competition between teams, perhaps fostered deliberately to increase productivity and maintain morale. The question of who these workers were has been the subject of considerable scholarly discussion. The consensus that has emerged is that the workforce was likely composed of two main groups. The first consisted of skilled craftsmen, stonemasons, carpenters, metalworkers, and others with specialized knowledge. These individuals probably worked year-round and formed the permanent core of the workforce. They would have been professionals trained in their crafts, possibly passing their skills from father to son. The second group consisted of seasonal workers, likely farmers from across Egypt who came to work on the pyramid during the inundation season, when the Nile's annual flood made agricultural work impossible. This period, lasting approximately 3 to 4 months each year, was when the river ran high enough to facilitate the transport of stone by boat. It was also when farmers had time available to participate in royal projects. This system of corvée labor required service to the state was a fundamental part of ancient Egyptian society. However, it was not slavery in the sense we typically understand the term. Workers were fed, housed, and cared for. They were organized into teams with identities and hierarchies. And they were participating in what they understood to be a sacred project, the construction of a tomb that would ensure their pharaoh's successful journey to the afterlife. The scale of the workforce remains a matter of debate. Herodotus's figure of 100,000 is generally considered an exaggeration. Modern estimates, based on the archaeological evidence and calculations of how much work could be accomplished with ancient tools and techniques, suggest a workforce of between 20,000 and 30,000 people at any given time. This would have included not just the workers directly involved in quarrying and placing stone, but also the support staff, bakers, brewers, tool makers, administrators, and others necessary to keep such a large operation functioning. The workers' settlement at Hayt el-Ghurab shows evidence of having been occupied for several decades, consistent with the estimated 20 to 23 years required to complete the Great Pyramid. The site was not a permanent city, but a purpose-built facility, constructed to support the pyramid project, and likely abandoned or repurposed once the work was complete. What emerges from all this evidence is a picture far more complex and interesting than the simple narrative of slavery. The construction of the Great Pyramid required not just labor, but skilled labor, organized labor, and motivated labor. It required a state apparatus capable of mobilizing resources on an enormous scale, not just the workers themselves, but the food to feed them the tools they needed, the housing to shelter them, and the medical care to maintain them. It required, in other words, a sophisticated society with advanced organizational capabilities, one that could coordinate the efforts of thousands of people toward a single goal over multiple decades. The workers who built the pyramid were part of this system, contributing their labor not under the lash, but as participants in what their culture understood to be a sacred and essential project. This understanding doesn't diminish the difficulty of the work or the sacrifices made by the workers. Moving and placing millions of tons of stone by hand was backbreaking labor, dangerous and exhausting. People were injured. Some undoubtedly died. But they did this work as part of a society that valued their contribution enough to feed them, well care for them when injured, and allow them to take pride in their teams and their accomplishments. The evidence from the workers' settlement reveals a society more sophisticated than we often imagine when we think of the ancient world. It shows us a civilization capable not just of impressive engineering, but of impressive social organization, one that could mobilize, house feed, and coordinate tens of thousands of people in service of a monumental goal. The pyramid stands as a testament, not just to ancient Egyptian engineering, but to ancient Egyptian society, to the power of organization skill and collective purpose in achieving what seems impossible. The science behind slopes. We've met the workers who built the pyramid and examined the stones they used. Now we face perhaps the most enduring question about the Great Pyramid. How did they lift millions of tons of stone to a height of 146 meters without modern machinery? This question has fascinated observers for more than 2 millennia. The Greek historian Herodotus, visiting Egypt around 450 BCE, already 2,000 years after the pyramid's construction, wrote that the Egyptians used machines made of short wooden planks to raise the stones from one level to the next. His description is tantalizingly vague, leaving generations of scholars to wonder what exactly he meant. Did he accurately record what his Egyptian guides told him? Or had the actual methods already been forgotten, replaced by speculation and legend? The challenge is substantial. The pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. The majority weigh around 2.5 tons, but some, particularly the granite beams in the king's chamber, weigh as much as 80 tons. These massive stones had to be moved not just horizontally, but vertically raised level by level as the pyramid grew higher, and this had to be accomplished with the technology available in the 3rd millennium BCE: copper tools, wooden sledges, and levers rope made from plant fibers, and human muscle power. Over the centuries, numerous theories have been proposed. Some have been fanciful, involving lost technologies, or even extraterrestrial assistance. But serious archaeological and engineering research has focused on more practical possibilities, each supported by varying degrees of evidence. The most straightforward theory involves the use of ramps. The basic concept is simple: build a ramp alongside the pyramid and drag the stones up this inclined plane. As the pyramid grows higher, extend the ramp, maintaining a workable gradient. Once the pyramid is complete, dismantle the ramp, leaving no trace of its existence. The appeal of this theory lies in its simplicity and the fact that ramps were definitely used in ancient Egyptian construction. Archaeological evidence from other building sites confirms this. The question is not whether the Egyptians used ramps, but what kind of ramps they used for the Great Pyramid. A straight ramp running from ground level to the pyramid's apex would need to be extraordinarily long to maintain a gradient shallow enough for workers to drag heavy stones. Calculations suggest such a ramp would need to be over a mile long and would contain more material than the pyramid itself. This seems impractical, and no archaeological evidence of such a massive ramp has been found at Giza. Mark Lehner, one of the leading authorities on the Giza pyramids, has proposed a modified version, a series of smaller ramps that zigzagged up the pyramid's face, or perhaps wrapped around it in a spiral. These would be more manageable in size and could be adjusted as construction progressed. Lehner points to evidence of ramp-like structures found around the pyramid, though these remains are fragmentary and their exact purpose is debated. Another theory proposed by French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin in 2007 suggests something quite different: an internal ramp spiraling up through the pyramid itself. According to Houdin's hypothesis, the Egyptians built an external ramp for the lower portion of the pyramid, but once they reached a certain height, they switched to an internal ramp that spiraled upward within the pyramid structure just beneath the outer casing stones. What makes Houdin's theory particularly intriguing is that it's supported by some physical evidence. Microgravimetry, surveys which measure tiny variations in the density of the pyramid's structure, have detected anomalies consistent with the presence of internal spaces where Houdin predicts his ramp should be. Thermal imaging has also revealed temperature differences in certain areas that might indicate less dense sections of the structure. However, the internal ramp theory remains controversial. Some Egyptologists point out that it would require extraordinary planning and precision to build such a ramp while simultaneously constructing the pyramid around it. Others note that no ancient Egyptian texts or images clearly depict such a technique, though this absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence. Let's consider another aspect of the problem: the actual mechanics of moving the stones. Even with a ramp, how did workers drag multi-ton blocks upward? Here, experimental archaeology has provided valuable insights. In 2014, a team of physicists from the University of Amsterdam, led by Daniel Bohn, conducted experiments that shed light on an ancient technique. They were inspired by a wall painting from the tomb of Jehutihotep, dating to around 1900 BCE, which shows a large statue being transported on a sledge. Notably, the painting depicts a worker pouring liquid, probably water, onto the sand in front of the sledge. Bond's team tested this technique in the laboratory. They found that adding the right amount of water to sand enough to make it damp but not soaked reduces the friction between the sledge and the sand by up to 50%. The water causes sand grains to clump together, creating a firmer, smoother surface. Too much water and the sledge sinks. Too little and the sand remains loose. But with the optimal moisture level, the force required to pull a loaded sledge drops dramatically. This discovery helps explain how relatively small teams of workers could move heavy stones. Experimental reconstructions have demonstrated that a team of 20 people can pull a 2.5-ton block on a wetted sand path, maintaining a steady pace over considerable distances. Scale this up to larger teams and heavier stones, and the basic feasibility becomes clear. But the Great Pyramid presents additional challenges that simple ramps and sledges don't fully address. Consider the king's chamber located near the pyramid's center, about 43 meters above ground level. The chamber's ceiling consists of 9 granite beams, each weighing approximately 50 to 80 tons. These massive stones had to be transported from Aswan, moved to the construction site, and then somehow lifted and positioned with precision in a confined space. Some researchers have proposed that the Egyptians used a system of levers and counterweights for the final positioning of such heavy stones. Wooden beams used as levers with stone fulcrums could allow workers to lift one end of a block, slightly insert packing material beneath it, then repeat the process on the other end, gradually raising the stone. This technique, while labor-intensive, requires only simple tools and could achieve precise positioning. Others have suggested the use of cradles or rockers, curved wooden frames that would allow a heavy stone to be tilted and walked forward by alternately lifting each end. Ancient Egyptian tomb paintings show workers using similar techniques for moving large statues and obelisks. The truth is that we don't have a complete answer. No ancient Egyptian text provides a detailed description of pyramid construction techniques. No contemporary images show the process clearly. What we have instead are fragments of evidence. Tool marks on stones, remains of ramps at various sites, depictions of stone-moving techniques in other contexts, and the pyramid itself, the ultimate proof that whatever methods were used, they worked. Modern engineers who have studied the problem generally agree that the pyramid could have been built with the technology available to the ancient Egyptians. The methods would have been labor-intensive and time-consuming, but not impossible. What impresses these engineers is not that the Egyptians lacked some crucial technology, but that they achieved such precision and scale with the tools they had. Computer modeling has allowed researchers to test various theories virtually. These simulations suggest that different methods might have been used at different stages of construction. External ramps might have been practical for the lower levels, while internal ramps levers or other techniques could have been employed higher up. The construction process likely evolved as the pyramid grew, with engineers adapting their methods to meet changing challenges. Archaeological evidence supports this idea of adaptive construction. The pyramid shows signs of changes in planning during its construction, adjustments to the internal chamber system, modifications to the design. This suggests that the builders were problem solvers, not simply following a fixed blueprint, but responding to challenges as they arose. What becomes clear from examining all these theories and evidence is that the construction of the Great Pyramid was not the result of a single clever technique, but of accumulated knowledge, careful planning, and adaptive problem solving. The Egyptians had been building in stone for generations before Khufu's pyramid. Each project taught lessons that informed the next. By the time work began at Giza, Egyptian engineers had developed a sophisticated understanding of how to work with stone, how to organize large workforces, and how to solve the practical problems of monumental construction. The question of how they lifted the stones may never be answered with absolute certainty. The methods used left little permanent trace, and the knowledge was likely passed down through practical training rather than written texts. But the pyramid itself stands as proof that the ancient Egyptians possessed both the technical knowledge and the organizational capability to accomplish what seems at first glance impossible. Each theory about ramps and lifting techniques reflects our own assumptions about what is practical or possible. The internal ramp theory appeals to our appreciation for elegant engineering solutions. The external ramp theory resonates with our understanding of straightforward brute force approaches. The truth may involve elements of both, or neither, or something we haven't yet imagined. What we can say with confidence is that the methods used were within the capabilities of ancient Egyptian technology and organization. No lost secrets or mysterious powers were necessary. Only knowledge, planning skill, and the coordinated effort of thousands of workers over many years. In some ways, this makes the achievement even more impressive. The pyramid stands not as evidence of some vanished super technology, but as a testament to what human beings can accomplish through ingenuity, persistence, and collective effort. Astronomical accuracy. Beyond the engineering challenges of moving stone, the Great Pyramid reveals another dimension of ancient Egyptian knowledge, a sophisticated understanding of astronomy and mathematics. When surveyors first measured the Great Pyramid with modern instruments in the 19th century, they discovered something remarkable. The four sides of the pyramid's base align almost perfectly with the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. The precision is extraordinary. The error is only 3 arc minutes, or 3/60th of a single degree. To put this in perspective, that's an accuracy level that would be challenging to achieve even with contemporary surveying equipment. This alignment was not accidental. The ancient Egyptians placed great importance on cardinal orientation, particularly the north-south axis, which held deep religious significance. But achieving such precision presented a considerable technical challenge. The Egyptians had no magnetic compasses. The magnetic compass would not be invented for another 3,000 years. They needed another method to determine true north, and the evidence suggests they found it in the stars. In the year 2000, Kate Spence, an Egyptologist and astronomer at Cambridge University, proposed an elegant solution to this puzzle. She suggested that the Egyptians used 2 stars, Kochab, in the constellation Ursa Minor and Mizar in Ursa Major to establish true north. Her theory is based on the phenomenon of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that causes the position of stars to shift gradually over millennia. According to Spence's calculations around 2467 BCE, these two stars would have aligned perfectly in a vertical line that pointed to true north. An Egyptian astronomer observing these stars at night could establish a precise north-south line by noting when they aligned vertically. Spence's theory is compelling, not just because it's astronomically sound, but because it provides a method that would have been practical with the tools available to ancient Egyptian astronomers: careful observation, patience, and geometric knowledge. The dating implied by Spence's astronomical alignment, 2467 BCE, falls within the range of dates estimated for the pyramid's construction based on other evidence lending additional support to her theory. However, some scholars have proposed alternative methods, including the use of the sun's shadow at specific times of year, or observations of circumpolar stars tracing their circular path around the celestial pole. The exact method remains debated, but the precision of the result is undeniable. The astronomical connections don't end with the pyramid's orientation. Inside the structure, narrow shafts extend from both the king's chamber and the queen's chamber, angling upward through the pyramid's mass. For many years, these were thought to be ventilation shafts, but this interpretation has been challenged by their astronomical alignments. The southern shaft from the king's chamber, when extended in a straight line, points toward the position where the belt stars of Orion would have appeared in the southern sky around 2500 BCE. Orion held profound significance in ancient Egyptian religion. The constellation was associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife and resurrection. In Egyptian mythology, Osiris was murdered by his brother Set, but was resurrected to become the ruler of the underworld and the judge of the dead. The pharaoh after death was believed to become one with Osiris. The northern shaft from the king's chamber aligns with Alpha Draconis, also known as Thuban. Due to precession, Thuban was the pole star during the Old Kingdom period, the star that remained nearly stationary in the northern sky, while all other stars appeared to rotate around it. This star represented the imperishable ones, the circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon, symbolizing eternal life. These alignments suggest that the shafts were not merely functional, but symbolic pathways for the pharaoh's spirit to ascend to the stars and join the gods. The precision of these alignments, like the cardinal orientation of the pyramid itself, demonstrates a sophisticated integration of astronomical observation with religious belief and architectural design. Let's consider another astronomical theory, one that has generated both fascination and controversy. In 1983, Robert Bauval, a construction engineer with an interest in Egyptology, proposed what he called the Orion correlation theory. Bauval noticed that the three pyramids of Giza, those of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure, are not arranged in a straight line. The third pyramid, Menkaure's, is offset slightly to the east of the line formed by the other two. Bauval observed that this arrangement mirrors the pattern of the three stars in Orion's belt, Alnitak Alnilam and Mintaka. The smallest of these stars, Mintaka, is offset from the line of the other two in the same way that the smallest pyramid, Menkaure's, is offset from the others. Furthermore, the relative sizes of the pyramids correspond roughly to the relative brightness of the stars. Bauval's theory extends beyond the pyramids themselves. He suggested that the Nile River corresponds to the Milky Way and that other monuments in the region might align with other stars, creating a terrestrial map of the heavens. This idea has captured popular imagination and has been featured in numerous books and documentaries. However, the Orion correlation theory remains controversial among Egyptologists. Critics point out that the correlation, while intriguing, is not perfect. The angles and proportions don't match exactly, and some argue that the similarities could be coincidental. Others note that there's no clear textual evidence from ancient Egypt explicitly stating that the pyramids were meant to represent Orion's belt, though the religious significance of Orion is well documented. The debate over Bauval's theory highlights a broader question: how much astronomical and mathematical knowledge should we attribute to the ancient Egyptians, and how much might be our own pattern-seeking projected onto ancient structures? This question becomes even more interesting when we consider the mathematical properties of the Great Pyramid. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height is remarkably close to 2p, twice the value of pi. Additionally, the slope angle of the pyramid's faces, approximately 51.84 degrees, is very close to the angle that would result from using the golden ratio in the pyramid's design. These mathematical relationships have led some researchers to propose that the ancient Egyptians deliberately incorporated pi and the golden ratio into the pyramid's design, suggesting a level of mathematical sophistication that would be impressive for any era. However, many Egyptologists are skeptical of this interpretation. The challenge is that these mathematical relationships could emerge naturally from the construction methods used without requiring explicit knowledge of pi or the golden ratio. For example, if the Egyptians designed the pyramid using a specific ratio of height to base that seemed aesthetically pleasing or structurally sound, they might have inadvertently created proportions that approximate these mathematical constants. Ancient Egyptian mathematical texts that have survived, such as the Rind papyrus and the Moscow papyrus, show that Egyptian mathematicians were skilled in practical geometry and arithmetic. They could calculate areas, volumes, and slopes. They used fractions and could solve complex problems related to construction and resource distribution. However, these texts don't show explicit knowledge of pi as a mathematical constant or the golden ratio as a geometric principle. This doesn't mean the Egyptians didn't understand these relationships intuitively or empirically. They may have discovered through experience that certain proportions produced stable, aesthetically pleasing structures without necessarily understanding the underlying mathematical principles in the abstract way we do today. What we can say with confidence is that the Great Pyramid demonstrates a sophisticated integration of observational astronomy, practical mathematics, and architectural design. Whether the astronomical alignments were primarily symbolic, functional, or both, they required careful planning and precise execution. Whether the mathematical proportions were deliberately chosen or emerged from practical construction methods, they reflect a culture that valued precision and had developed effective techniques for achieving it. The pyramid stands at the intersection of earth and sky, of practical engineering and cosmic symbolism. Its orientation connects it to the cardinal directions and the daily path of the sun. Its internal shafts point toward stars associated with resurrection and eternal life. Its proportions, whether by design or happy accident, embody mathematical relationships that continue to fascinate us. This integration of astronomy, mathematics, and architecture reveals something important about ancient Egyptian civilization. These were not separate domains of knowledge, but interconnected aspects of a unified worldview. The pyramid was not just a tomb, but a machine for resurrection, a structure that would enable the Pharaoh's spirit to ascend to the heavens and join the eternal stars. Every aspect of its design, from its cardinal orientation to its internal passages, to its overall proportions, serve this ultimate purpose. The precision we see in the Great Pyramid reflects not just technical skill, but a culture that saw the cosmos as ordered and meaningful, where earthly structures could mirror and connect with celestial patterns. Whether we can fully reconstruct the astronomical methods and mathematical knowledge of the ancient Egyptians, or not, the pyramid itself stands as evidence of their sophisticated understanding of the relationship between earth and sky, between the mortal and the eternal. Inside the Great Pyramid, we've examined the pyramid's exterior alignment with the stars. Now let's venture inside into the network of passages and chambers that lie hidden within millions of tons of stone. For most of the pyramid's history, its interior remained sealed and inaccessible. The original entrance, located on the north face about 17 meters above ground level, was concealed behind smooth casing stones and was not obvious to casual observers. This entrance led to a descending passage barely 1 meter high and 1 meter wide, sloping downward at an angle of 26 degrees into the bedrock beneath the pyramid. The first people known to have penetrated the pyramid in the Common Era were not archaeologists but treasure hunters. In 820 CE, Caliph Abdullah al-Mamun, son of the famous Harun al-Rashid, ordered his workers to tunnel into the pyramid's north face. Al-Mamun had heard legends of treasure and ancient knowledge hidden within, and he was determined to find it. His workers, using iron tools and fire to crack the limestone, carved a passage that today bears his name, the Mamun Tunnel. By chance or calculation, Al-Mamun's tunnel intersected with the pyramid's original internal passages. What his workers discovered was not treasure, but something perhaps more intriguing, a complex system of corridors and chambers carefully constructed within the pyramid's mass. The pyramid had already stood for more than 3,000 years when Al-Mamun's men broke through, and what they found raised questions that remain unanswered to this day. The original descending passage, the one that begins at the true entrance, continues downward for more than 100 meters, first through the pyramid's masonry and then carved into the bedrock beneath. It terminates in a chamber hewn from the living rock approximately 14 meters below the pyramid's base level. This chamber, known as the subterranean chamber, is rough and unfinished. Its floor is uneven, and a shaft in the floor descends another 9 meters before ending abruptly. The walls show tool marks but lack the precision seen elsewhere in the pyramid. Why was this chamber left unfinished? One theory suggests it was the original burial chamber abandoned when the builders changed their plans. Another proposes it was always intended to remain incomplete, perhaps serving some symbolic purpose related to the underworld in Egyptian cosmology. The chamber's rough state contrasts sharply with the precision evident in the pyramid's other internal spaces, suggesting either a change in plan or a deliberate choice. From the descending passage approximately 30 meters from the entrance, an ascending passage branches upward. This ascending corridor climbs at the same angle as the descending, 126 degrees, but in the opposite direction, rising through the pyramid's core. Like the descending passage, it's barely a meter square, requiring visitors to crouch or crawl. The passage is approximately 40 meters long and was originally sealed by 3 massive granite plugs, each weighing several tons. These plugs were already in place when Al-Mamun's workers broke through, forcing them to tunnel around the obstruction through the softer limestone. The ascending passage leads to one of the pyramid's most impressive architectural features, the Grand Gallery. This is a corbelled vault rising 8.6 meters high and 46 meters long, still climbing at that same 26-degree angle. The walls consist of limestone blocks, each course projecting slightly inward from the one below, creating a narrowing vault that culminates in a ceiling less than a meter wide. The precision of the Grand Gallery's construction is remarkable. The walls are smooth and straight, the angle consistent throughout. Walking up the Grand Gallery, or rather climbing it, given the steep slope, one notices slots cut into the stone benches that run along either side. The purpose of these slots has been debated. Some researchers suggest they once held wooden beams that supported the granite plugs before they were released to seal the ascending passage. Others propose they were part of a system for moving the heavy stones used in construction. The Grand Gallery represents a level of architectural ambition and skill that goes beyond mere functionality. At the lower end of the Grand Gallery, a horizontal passage branches off, leading to what's known as the Queen's Chamber. This name is a misnomer. It was given by Arab explorers who assumed, based on their own cultural practices, that the pointed ceiling indicated a woman's burial place. In fact, Egyptian queens were never buried in pyramids with their husbands. The chamber measures approximately 5.7 meters north to south and 5.2 meters east to west, with a pointed ceiling, rising to about 6 meters at its apex. The queen's chamber contains several puzzling features. A niche in the eastern wall, approximately 5 meters high, appears to have been enlarged at some point, perhaps by treasure hunters seeking hidden passages. The chamber was found empty with no sarcophagus or burial equipment. Most intriguingly, 2 small shafts, approximately 20 centimeters square, extend from the north and south walls. These shafts, similar to those in the king's chamber but smaller, were originally hidden behind the wall surface and were only discovered in 1872 when an engineer noticed cracks in the wall. Returning to the grand gallery and continuing upward, we reach the king's chamber, the pyramid's largest and most carefully constructed internal space. The chamber measures 10.5 meters due east to west, 5.2 meters north to south, and 5.8 meters high. Unlike the queen's chamber with its pointed ceiling, the king's chamber has a flat ceiling, composed of 9 massive granite beams, each weighing approximately 50 tons. These beams span the entire width of the chamber, resting on the walls without any visible means of support beyond their own weight and friction. The king's chamber is constructed entirely of red granite brought from Aswan, more than 800 kilometers away. The blocks are fitted together with remarkable precision, and the walls are smooth and vertical. In the western end of the chamber sits a granite sarcophagus, lidless and empty. The sarcophagus is slightly wider than the ascending passage, indicating it must have been placed in the chamber during construction before the roof was completed. The sarcophagus itself raises questions. It shows signs of damage. One corner is broken, and there are marks suggesting attempts to break into it, though whether these occurred in ancient times or later is unclear. No trace of a mummy or burial goods has ever been found in the king's chamber. Whether the chamber was robbed in antiquity or never used for burial remains unknown. Above the king's chamber lie 5 additional spaces known as the relieving chambers. These are not accessible from the main passage system. They were discovered by explorers who found cracks in the chamber's ceiling and investigated. The lowest of these spaces was found in 1765 by Nathaniel Davison, and the upper 4 were discovered in 1837 by Colonel Howard Weiss, who used gunpowder to blast through the granite. These relieving chambers serve an engineering purpose. They distribute the enormous weight of the pyramid's mass above, preventing it from crushing the king's chamber. The chambers are crude spaces with rough walls and ceilings never intended to be seen. But they contain something of great historical importance, graffiti left by the ancient workers. Written in red ochre paint, these marks include the names of work gangs and, significantly, the name of Khufu himself, written in hieroglyphs. These inscriptions provide some of the strongest evidence linking Khufu to the pyramid's construction. From both the king's chamber and the queen's chamber, narrow shafts extend through the pyramid's mass. The shafts from the king's chamber reach the pyramid's exterior, while those from the queen's chamber do not. They were blocked by stone doors discovered only through robotic exploration in recent decades. The purpose of these shafts has been much debated. The traditional explanation that they were ventilation shafts has been questioned, particularly for the queen's chamber shafts, which don't reach the exterior. The astronomical alignments of the king's chamber shafts pointing toward significant stars suggest a religious or symbolic purpose. The pyramid's internal architecture presents us with a puzzle. Why 3 chambers? Why was the subterranean chamber left unfinished? Why does the queen's chamber lack a sarcophagus? Why are the shafts from the queen's chamber blocked? These questions have generated numerous theories, but no definitive answers. One possibility is that the pyramid's design evolved during construction. Perhaps the subterranean chamber was the original plan, then abandoned in favor of the queen's chamber, which was in turn superseded by the king's chamber. The ascending passage and grand gallery might have been added as the design changed. This would explain the unfinished state of the subterranean chamber and the lack of a sarcophagus in the queen's chamber. Another theory suggests that all three chambers were part of the original plan, each serving a different purpose in the complex religious rituals associated with the pharaoh's death and resurrection. The subterranean chamber might represent the underworld, the queen's chamber an intermediate space, and the king's chamber the final resting place, aligned with the stars and the heavens. What we can say with certainty is that the pyramid's interior represents a remarkable feat of engineering and planning. The passages and chambers were constructed within the growing pyramid, requiring careful coordination between the internal and external construction. The massive granite beams of the king's chamber had to be moved into place and lifted to their final position. The relieving chambers had to be built above the king's chamber before construction continued upward. Every element had to be precisely positioned, knowing that once the pyramid was complete, there would be no opportunity for adjustment or correction. The interior of the Great Pyramid reveals a structure far more complex than a simple pile of stones. It shows planning, adaptation, and sophisticated engineering. Each passage, each chamber, each shaft was constructed for a reason, even if those reasons remain unclear to us. The pyramid's interior spaces invite us to think about purpose and meaning, about the relationship between architecture and belief, about what the ancient Egyptians hoped to achieve through this monumental construction. The mysterious tunnels. Within the chambers, we've explored live features that have puzzled researchers for more than a century. Narrow shafts that extend through the pyramid's mass, their purpose still debated today. These shafts were first noticed in 1872 by British engineer Wayman Dixon, who was examining the king's chamber when he observed that similar features might exist in the queen's chamber. Using a hammer and chisel, he broke through the south wall of the queen's chamber and discovered a square shaft approximately 20 centimeters on each side, extending into the pyramid structure. He found a similar shaft on the north wall. The shafts from the king's chamber had been known since ancient times. They opened directly onto the chamber walls and eventually reached the pyramid's exterior. But the queen's chamber shafts were different. They began 5 centimeters behind the chamber's finished wall surface, hidden from view, and their destination was unknown. For decades, these shafts were called air shafts, under the assumption that they provided ventilation for workers during construction or for the burial chamber itself. This explanation seemed reasonable for the king's chamber shafts, which do reach the outside. But the queen's chamber shafts presented a problem. They didn't appear to exit the pyramid. If they were for ventilation, why didn't they reach the exterior, and why were they hidden behind the wall surface? The mystery deepened in March 1993 when German robotics engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink was hired by the German Archaeological Institute to improve ventilation in the pyramid by installing fans in the shafts. Gantenbrink had designed a small robot called Upu-At-2, named after the Egyptian god who opened the ways for the dead, specifically to explore these narrow passages. The robot was equipped with camera lights and could navigate the steep incline of the shafts. On March 22nd, Gantenbrink sent Upu-At-2 up the southern shaft from the queen's chamber. The robot climbed steadily, transmitting images as it went. The shaft was remarkably straight and smooth, maintaining its square cross-section. After traveling approximately 65 meters, the robot's camera revealed something unexpected. The shaft ended at a small limestone block, different from the surrounding walls. The block appeared to seal the passage, and notably, it had 2 copper fittings, or handles attached to it, eroded green with age. The discovery of what came to be called Gantenbrink's door generated considerable excitement. What lay beyond this blocking stone? Was it another chamber? Did it contain artifacts or inscriptions? The copper fittings, suggested the block was meant to be moved, yet it had remained in place for more than 4,000 years. The Egyptian authorities were cautious about proceeding further. The pyramid is an irreplaceable monument, and any intervention carries risk. It would be nearly a decade before another attempt was made to investigate what lay beyond the door. In September 2002, a team led by Zahi Hawass, then Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, organized a live television exploration. Using a robot equipped with a drill, they carefully made a small hole through the blocking stone. A camera was inserted through the hole, and millions of viewers around the world watched as the image was transmitted. Behind the first door was a small space, and beyond that, another blocking stone, similar to the first. The discovery was both enlightening and frustrating. The shaft continued beyond the first door, but its ultimate destination remained unknown. The presence of a second door suggested that whatever the shaft's purpose, it involved multiple barriers. Some researchers speculated about hidden chambers. Others suggested the doors might be symbolic, representing gates the pharaoh's spirit would pass through on its journey to the afterlife. Let's consider what happened next. In 2010, a more sophisticated robot called Jedi, named after the magician who, according to ancient texts, advised Khufu on the design of his pyramid, was sent to investigate further. Jedi was equipped with a flexible camera that could be maneuvered to look around corners and examine surfaces from different angles. This capability allowed researchers to see what previous explorations had missed the back side of the first blocking stone. The images Jedi transmitted were intriguing. On the back of the door, invisible to previous cameras, were red ochre markings, lines and symbols drawn by hand. These marks appeared to be hieratic numerals, or mason's marks, similar to those found in the relieving chambers above the king's chamber. They suggested that the blocking stones had been put in place during construction, not added later. The marks might indicate measurements, positions, or simply the work gang responsible for that section. The northern shaft from the Queen's chamber presented similar mysteries. In 2002, a robot exploration revealed that it, too, ended at a blocking stone, though this one lacked the copper fittings. The shaft had a more irregular path than the southern one, with what appeared to be a sharp turn or bend partway along its length. This irregularity has led some researchers to suggest the northern shaft might have been abandoned or modified during construction. The purpose of these shafts remains one of Egyptology's enduring puzzles. Several theories have been proposed, each with supporting arguments and unanswered questions. The religious interpretation suggests the shafts were symbolic pathways for the pharaoh's soul. In ancient Egyptian belief, the Ka, the life force needed to be able to move freely. The shafts, particularly those from the king's chamber with their stellar alignments, might have been intended as routes for the Ka to ascend to the stars. The blocking stones in the queen's chamber shafts could represent symbolic doors that the spirit could pass through, even though they were physically sealed. This interpretation is supported by the shaft's alignments. The southern shaft from the king's chamber points toward where Orion's belt would have appeared in the southern sky around 2500 BCE, while the northern shaft aligns with the circumpolar stars. These alignments suggest deliberate astronomical orientation, consistent with religious purpose. Another theory proposes a more practical function. Some engineers have suggested the shafts might have been part of the construction process, perhaps used to establish alignment points or to allow workers to check measurements from different levels of the pyramid. The blocking stones might have been placed to seal these construction features once they were no longer needed. A third possibility is that the shafts served multiple purposes, practical during construction and symbolic afterward. The ancient Egyptians were skilled at creating structures that functioned on multiple levels, combining practical necessity with religious meaning. What makes the shaft mystery particularly intriguing is what it reveals about the limitations of our knowledge. Despite more than a century of study, despite sophisticated robotic exploration, We still don't know where these shafts ultimately lead or what their primary purpose was. The blocking stones with their copper fittings and hieratic marks raise as many questions as they answer. Recent technological advances offer hope for further discoveries. Ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive scanning techniques might reveal what lies beyond the second set of doors without requiring physical intervention. Some researchers have proposed using even smaller robots capable of passing through tiny gaps to explore further. Others suggest that careful drilling and fiber optic cameras might allow us to see beyond the current limits of exploration. The Egyptian authorities face a delicate balance. There is scientific value in exploring further, in potentially discovering new chambers or artifacts. But there is also the responsibility to preserve the pyramid for future generations. Any intervention, no matter how careful, carries some risk of damage. The decision of whether and how to proceed with further exploration involves weighing these competing concerns. The shafts and their blocking stones remind us that the Great Pyramid still holds secrets. After more than 4 millennia, after countless explorations and studies, the pyramid continues to surprise us with hidden features and unexplained elements. Each discovery, whether it's a blocking stone with copper fittings or hieratic marks on hidden surfaces, adds to our understanding while simultaneously revealing how much we still don't know. These narrow passages, barely wide enough for a small robot to navigate, connect us across time to the ancient builders. The copper fittings, green with age, were shaped and attached by human hands more than 4,000 years ago. The red ochre marks were drawn by workers whose names we'll never know, but whose careful work has survived into our era. The shafts themselves, cut with precision through solid limestone, represent planning and purpose that we're still trying to fully understand. The mystery of the shafts illustrates a broader truth about the pyramid. It was designed not just as a physical structure, but as a complex symbolic and functional system. Every element from the grand chambers to these narrow passages was part of a larger conception that integrated architecture, astronomy, religion, and perhaps purposes we haven't yet imagined. The blocking stones, whether they seal hidden chambers or simply mark the end of symbolic pathways, are part of this integrated design, and understanding them requires understanding the worldview of their creators. Big gap. The narrow shafts we've explored hint at hidden spaces within the pyramid. But in 2017, researchers discovered something far larger, a void that had remained undetected for more than 4,000 years. On November 2, 2017, an international team of scientists announced a discovery that captured worldwide attention. Using a technology that sounds like science fiction, cosmic ray imaging, they had detected a large void inside the Great Pyramid, located above the Grand Gallery. The void appeared to be at least 30 meters long, with a cross-section similar to the Grand Gallery itself. This was not a small shaft or a minor cavity. This was a significant space hidden within the pyramid's mass, in a structure that had been studied, measured, and explored for centuries. The discovery was made possible by muon radiography, a technique that uses particles called muons to create images of dense structures. Muons are subatomic particles created when cosmic rays from space collide with atoms in Earth's upper atmosphere. These particles rain down on our planet, constantly, billions of them, passing through every square meter every minute. Most muons pass through ordinary matter easily, but denser materials like stone slow them down or stop them. By placing detectors inside the pyramid and measuring how many muons arrive from different directions, scientists can create a kind of X-ray image of the structure, revealing areas of higher and lower density. The Scan Pyramids project, launched in 2015, brought together researchers from multiple institutions and countries. The Japanese team from Nagoya University and the Keiki Particle Physics Laboratory used nuclear emulsion films, a technology originally developed for particle physics research. The French team from the CEA and the Heritage Innovation Preservation Institute employed scintillator hodoscopes detectors that flash when muons pass through them. A third team used gas detectors based on Micromega's technology. Let's consider how the discovery unfolded. The detectors were placed in the Queen's chamber and in the area below the pyramid, and data was collected over many months. Slowly, as millions of muons were recorded, patterns emerged. All three teams, working independently with different technologies, detected the same anomaly, an area above the Grand Gallery where more muons were arriving than expected, indicating a less dense region, a void. The announcement was carefully worded. The researchers described it as a big void rather than a chamber, acknowledging that their technique could detect empty space but couldn't reveal details about its shape, contents, or purpose. Mehdi Tayyoubi, co-director of the Scan Pyramids mission, emphasized that this was a significant discovery, but that much remained unknown. The void appeared to have a length of at least 30 meters and was located approximately 40 to 50 meters above ground level, positioned above the Grand Gallery at a similar angle. The discovery immediately sparked debate within the Egyptological community. Some researchers were excited by the possibility of a new chamber potentially containing artifacts or inscriptions that could shed light on the pyramid's construction and purpose. Others urged caution, noting that the muon data showed a void, but couldn't determine whether it was a deliberate chamber or simply a structural feature. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former Minister of Antiquities and one of the world's most prominent Egyptologists, expressed skepticism. He suggested that the void might be a construction gap or a series of smaller spaces, rather than a single large chamber. Hawass noted that the pyramid had been thoroughly studied for decades, and he questioned whether such a large space could have remained undetected. He called for additional evidence before drawing conclusions about the void's nature and significance. Other Egyptologists offered different interpretations. Some proposed that the void might be similar to the relieving chambers above the king's chamber spaces, designed to distribute weight and protect the chamber below. The Grand Gallery, with its corbelled vault rising more than 8 meters high, would have required some means of preventing the massive weight above from crushing it. A void above the gallery could serve this structural purpose. Another theory suggests the void might be related to the pyramid's construction process. Some researchers have proposed that internal ramps were used to move stones as the pyramid grew higher. The void detected by muon imaging could be the remains of such a ramp, a space left within the pyramid structure after construction was complete. This interpretation would align with Jean-Pierre Houdin's theory of internal ramps, though it doesn't prove that theory definitively. A more speculative interpretation holds that the void might be a sealed chamber, perhaps containing burial goods, ritual objects, or even a sarcophagus. Proponents of this view note that the void's size and position would be consistent with a significant chamber, and they point to the precedent of hidden spaces within the pyramid, such as the shafts from the Queen's chamber that were concealed behind the wall surface. The challenge facing researchers is how to investigate further without damaging the pyramid. The muon imaging technique is entirely non-invasive. It simply records particles that pass through the structure naturally. But confirming the void's nature and contents would require some form of physical access. Drilling even a small hole through tens of meters of limestone carries risks. The pyramid structure is delicately balanced, and any intervention could potentially cause damage. Several approaches have been proposed. One possibility involves using very small robotic devices, similar to those used to explore the shafts from the Queen's chamber. If a natural crack or existing passage could be found that leads toward the void, a miniature robot equipped with cameras might be able to investigate without requiring new drilling. Another approach would use ground-penetrating radar or other scanning technologies to gather more detailed information about the void's shape and contents before any physical intervention. The Egyptian government has been cautious about authorizing further exploration. The Ministry of Antiquities must balance scientific curiosity against the responsibility to preserve the pyramid for future generations. Any decision to investigate the void physically would require careful planning, international consultation, and approval at the highest levels of government. As of recent years, discussions continue about the best way to proceed. Some researchers advocate for patience, suggesting that advancing technology will eventually provide better tools for non-invasive investigation. Others argue that the potential for significant discoveries justifies careful, limited physical exploration. The debate reflects broader questions about how we approach archaeological sites. When does the value of new knowledge justify the risks of intervention? What makes the void's discovery particularly significant is what it reveals about the limitations of traditional archaeological methods. The Great Pyramid has been measured, mapped, and studied more intensively than perhaps any other ancient structure. Generations of archaeologists, engineers, and researchers have examined every accessible part of it. Yet it took a technology developed for particle physics, a technique that uses cosmic rays from space to reveal that a major feature of the pyramid's interior had remained undetected. This discovery suggests that other hidden spaces might exist within the pyramid. If a void 30 meters long could remain unknown until 2017, what else might be hidden within the 6 million tons of stone? The pyramid's interior architecture is already complex with multiple chambers, passages, and shafts. The existence of additional voids or chambers would add another layer to this complexity. The void also raises questions about the ancient Egyptians' architectural knowledge and intentions. If it is a deliberate chamber, why was it built? Why is it positioned above the grand gallery? If it's a structural feature, what does it tell us about how the Egyptians understood load distribution and architectural engineering? If it's related to construction methods, what does it reveal about the techniques used to build the pyramid? These questions remain open. The void has been detected, its existence confirmed by multiple independent teams using different technologies. But its nature, purpose, and contents, if any, remain unknown. It stands as a reminder that even in our age of advanced technology, even with structures we've studied for centuries, mysteries remain. The Great Pyramid continues to guard its secrets, revealing them, slowly challenging each generation to develop new methods of investigation and new ways of understanding the achievements of the ancient world. The discovery of the void demonstrates that the pyramid still has the power to surprise us, to challenge our assumptions, and to remind us of how much we have yet to learn. It invites us to wonder what other secrets might lie hidden within this ancient monument, waiting for future technologies or future insights to bring them to light. Pharaoh's Curse. From the hidden spaces within the pyramids, we turn to a different kind of mystery, one that emerged not from ancient Egypt but from the 20th century, when the opening of a tomb gave birth to one of archaeology's most enduring legends. On November 4, 1922, in the Valley of the Kings near Luxor, British archaeologist Howard Carter made the discovery of a lifetime. After years of searching, funded by his patron Lord Carnarvon, Carter's team uncovered a stairway leading down into the bedrock. Over the following days, they cleared the stairs and found a sealed doorway bearing the cartouche, the royal name seal of a pharaoh named Tutankhamun. The tomb appeared to be intact, untouched by the grave robbers who had plundered nearly every other royal burial in the valley. Carter sent a telegram to Lord Carnarvon in England. At last have made wonderful discovery in valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact. Recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations. Carnarvon traveled to Egypt, arriving in the late November, and on November 26th, Carter made a small opening in the doorway. Carnarvon asked if he could see anything. Carter's reply would become famous Yes, wonderful things. The tomb of Tutankhamun contained treasures beyond imagination: golden shrines, jewelry, furniture, chariots, and the pharaoh's mummy encased in a solid gold coffin. The discovery captured worldwide attention. Newspapers around the globe ran stories about the boy king and his magnificent burial. The tomb's opening was scheduled for February 16th, 1923, with a select group of officials and dignitaries present. Lord Carnarvon was among those who entered the burial chamber that day. He was 56 years old in reasonably good health, despite a serious automobile accident years earlier that had left him with weakened lungs. The opening of the tomb proceeded without incident, revealing wonders that would take years to catalog and remove. But on April 5th, 1923, less than 2 months after the tomb's opening, Lord Carnarvon died in Cairo. The cause was blood poisoning resulting from an infected mosquito bite that he had accidentally cut while shaving. The infection led to pneumonia, and given his compromised respiratory system, he could not recover. His death was tragic, but from a medical perspective, not particularly mysterious. Infected wounds and pneumonia were common causes of death in the 1920s before the advent of antibiotics. However, the press saw the story differently. The death of the man who had funded the discovery, occurring so soon after the tomb's opening, seemed too coincidental to ignore. Newspapers, particularly in Britain, began to speak of a curse of the pharaohs. The story was too compelling to resist ancient Egypt, mysterious tombs, fabulous treasures, and now death striking those who had disturbed the pharaoh's rest. The narrative gained momentum when other deaths followed. In 1924, a British radiologist who had X-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy died. In 1926, Carnarvon's half-brother died reportedly from blood poisoning. Over the following years, as more people connected to the excavation died from various causes at various ages, the curse legend grew stronger. The story that captured public imagination most vividly involved a supposed inscription found in the tomb. According to newspaper reports, particularly in the Daily Express, a clay tablet discovered in the tomb bore a warning written in hieroglyphs: "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." This curse, the papers suggested, had claimed Lord Carnarvon and would claim others who had violated the tomb. There was one significant problem with this story: the tablet never existed. No such inscription was found in Tutankhamun's tomb. No photographs document it, no archaeological records mention it, and no one involved in the excavation ever reported seeing it. The curse inscription appears to have been entirely fabricated by journalists seeking to sensationalize the story. Let's consider what actually happened to the people involved in the tomb's opening. In 1933, a decade after the discovery, a study examined the fate of the 26 people present when the burial chamber was opened. Of these 26 individuals, only 6 had died within the following 10 years. This mortality rate was actually lower than would be expected for a group of that age and composition. The remaining 20 people were alive and well, showing no signs of being cursed. Most notably, Howard Carter himself, the man who had spent the most time in the tomb, who had handled the mummy and the artifacts, who had breathed the tomb's air for hours on end over many months, lived until 1939, dying of lymphoma at age 64. If anyone should have been affected by a curse, it would have been Carter. Yet he lived for 17 years after the tomb's discovery, long enough to see much of its contents studied and displayed. The scientific community sought to understand whether there might be any real dangers associated with ancient tombs, even if not supernatural ones. One hypothesis proposed that sealed tombs might harbor dangerous fungi or bacteria that had survived for millennia in the dry, enclosed environment. When the tomb was opened and fresh air entered, these organisms might become active and potentially harmful to those who breathed them in. This theory gained some support from the fact that Lord Carnarvon had weakened lungs and died of respiratory complications. Perhaps some suggested he had inhaled fungal spores or bacteria from the tomb that his compromised immune system couldn't fight off. The theory seemed plausible enough to warrant investigation. In 1999, Dr. Gotthard Kramer, a German microbiologist, conducted a study examining samples from various Egyptian tombs. He found that while some tombs did contain fungi and bacteria, the concentrations were not significantly higher than those found in the outside environment. More importantly, he found no evidence of particularly dangerous or unusual organisms. The study concluded that the health risk from entering ancient tombs was minimal for people with normal immune systems. However, research continued. In 2013, a team of researchers did identify the presence of Aspergillus fungi in some Egyptian tombs. Aspergillus can cause respiratory problems, particularly in people with weakened immune systems or existing lung conditions. This finding suggested that there might be some real, if minor, health risks associated with tomb exploration, not a supernatural curse, but a natural biological hazard that could be managed with proper precautions. The curse legend persisted despite the evidence against it, and this persistence reveals something interesting about human psychology. The story of the Pharaoh's curse appealed to something deep in the public imagination, a sense that disturbing the dead, particularly the sacred dead, of an ancient civilization should have consequences. It reflected both fascination within fear of ancient Egypt, a culture that seemed to possess knowledge and power beyond ordinary understanding. The curse narrative also served practical purposes for some involved in Egyptology. Carter himself, frustrated by the constant interruptions from tourists and journalists, occasionally hinted at the curse to discourage unwanted visitors. The Egyptian government, seeking to maintain control over archaeological sites, sometimes found the curse legend useful in discouraging unauthorized excavations and tomb robbing. The media's role in creating and perpetuating the curse legend cannot be overstated. In the 1920s, newspapers competed fiercely for readers, and sensational stories sold papers. The Curse of Tutankhamun provided exactly the kind of mysterious, exotic narrative that captured public attention. Each new death of anyone even tangentially connected to the tomb was reported as further evidence of the curse, while the continued good health of most people involved was largely ignored. The curse legend also reflected contemporary attitudes toward archaeology and cultural heritage. In the early 20th century, the removal of artifacts from Egypt to museums in Europe and America was common practice, though increasingly controversial. The curse narrative, in a sense, gave voice to the idea that such removal was wrong, that the ancient Egyptians had the power to punish those who disturbed their rest and took their possessions. Modern Egyptologists view the curse legend with a mixture of amusement and frustration. It has become so embedded in popular culture that it's difficult to discuss ancient Egyptian tombs without someone mentioning curses. This can overshadow the real archaeological and historical significance of discoveries like Tutankhamun's tomb. The tomb's importance lies not in any supernatural curse, but in what it reveals about ancient Egyptian culture, art, religion, and burial practices. What the curse legend ultimately reveals is not about ancient Egypt, but about ourselves, about our need for mystery, our fascination with death and the supernatural, and our complex feelings about disturbing the past. The story persists because it speaks to something in human nature, a sense that some boundaries should not be crossed. Some mysteries should remain inviolate. The irony is that the ancient Egyptians did believe in protecting their tombs, but through practical means rather than supernatural curses. They concealed entrances, built false chambers to mislead robbers, and employed guards. The real curse, they feared, was not magical, but material, the desecration of the body and the theft of goods needed for the afterlife. The elaborate precautions they took were meant to prevent physical disturbance, not to invoke supernatural vengeance. The legend of the Pharaoh's curse reminds us of the power of narrative, of how stories can take on lives of their own, becoming more influential than facts. It shows how our interpretations of the past are shaped by the concerns and imaginations of the present. And it demonstrates that sometimes the mysteries we create ourselves are more enduring than the ancient mysteries we seek to solve. Alien hypothesis. We've examined the cursed legend and how modern narratives can obscure ancient realities. Now we turn to perhaps the most controversial modern interpretation of the pyramids, the theory that they could not have been built by human hands alone. In 1968, a Swiss hotel manager named Erich von Däniken published a book titled Chariots of the Gods. The book proposed a radical idea that many ancient monuments, including the Egyptian pyramids, were built with the assistance of extraterrestrial visitors. Von Däniken argued that ancient peoples lacked the knowledge and technology to create such structures, and therefore must have received help from advanced alien civilizations. The book became an international bestseller, translated into dozens of languages, and selling millions of copies worldwide. Von Däniken's arguments centered on several key points. He emphasized the mathematical precision of the pyramids, particularly their alignment with cardinal directions and their incorporation of mathematical constants like pi. He questioned how ancient Egyptians could have moved and lifted stones weighing many tons without modern machinery. He pointed to the astronomical alignments of various ancient structures as evidence of knowledge that could only have come from advanced beings capable of space travel. The book struck a chord with popular imagination. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, interest in UFOs and extraterrestrial life was high. The space race was underway, humans had landed on the moon, and the possibility of life beyond Earth seemed more real than ever. Von Däniken's theories offered an exciting reinterpretation of history, suggesting that humanity had been visited and aided by advanced civilizations from the stars. Over the following decades, the ancient astronaut theory, as it came to be called, gained a substantial following. Other authors expanded on von Däniken's ideas, proposing that various ancient mysteries, from the Nazca lines in Peru to the statues of Easter Island, were evidence of extraterrestrial contact. Television programs, particularly the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, which premiered in 2009, brought these theories to millions of viewers, presenting them alongside interviews with proponents and dramatic reenactments. The arguments presented by ancient astronaut theorists regarding the pyramids typically follow certain patterns. They emphasize the difficulty of the construction, often stating that it would be impossible for ancient peoples to achieve such precision and scale. They point to the lack of written records detailing construction methods as evidence that the knowledge came from elsewhere. They interpret ancient Egyptian art and hieroglyphs as depicting spacecraft astronauts or advanced technology. And they suggest that the pyramids might have served purposes beyond burial, perhaps as power plants, communication devices, or landing markers for spacecraft. Let's consider how the archaeological and Egyptological communities have responded to these theories. The response has been largely critical, and the criticism operates on several levels. First, there is the matter of evidence. Archaeological science is built on physical evidence, artifacts, structures, texts, and other material remains that can be studied, measured, and verified. The ancient astronaut theory, despite its popularity, lacks supporting physical evidence. No alien artifacts have been found in or around the pyramids. No ancient Egyptian texts mention visitors from the stars. No technology beyond what ancient Egyptians could have produced has been discovered at pyramid sites. Second, the ancient astronaut theory fundamentally misunderstands or misrepresents what archaeologists have actually discovered about ancient Egyptian civilization. Far from being a mysterious culture with inexplicable knowledge, the ancient Egyptians left extensive evidence of their capabilities. their methods, and their gradual development of architectural and engineering techniques. Mark Lehner, one of the world's leading experts on the Giza pyramids, has been particularly vocal in his criticism of ancient astronaut theories. He points out that we have found the tools the Egyptians used: copper chisels, stone hammers, wooden sledges. We have found the quarries where they cut the stone complete with tool marks and partially extracted blocks. We have found the workers' settlements where the builders lived with evidence of their daily lives, their food, their injuries, and their medical care. Perhaps most significantly, we have found evidence of the pyramid's evolution. The earliest Egyptian pyramids were step pyramids, essentially stacked mastabas, rectangular tomb structures. The Pyramid of Djoser, built around 2630 BCE, shows this early form. Later pyramids show experimentation and learning. The bent pyramid at Dashur, built by Sneferu, shows a change in angle partway up, evidence that the builders encountered structural problems and adapted their design. The Red Pyramid, also built by Sneferu, successfully achieved a true pyramid shape. These structures show a clear progression of knowledge and technique, culminating in the Great Pyramid built by Sneferu's son, Khufu. This progression is exactly what we would expect from human innovation: gradual improvement through trial and error, learning from mistakes and building on previous achievements. It's not consistent with the sudden introduction of advanced knowledge from an external source. The discovery of the Diary of Merer in 2013 provided additional evidence against the ancient astronaut theory. This papyrus, written by an official involved in transporting stone for the Great Pyramid, describes in mundane detail the logistics of the project: how many boats were used, where they traveled, how the stone was delivered. It's the kind of practical administrative document that reflects a large-scale human construction project, not the mysterious work of alien technology. Experimental archaeology has also played a role in refuting ancient astronaut claims. Researchers have successfully demonstrated that ancient Egyptian techniques could indeed accomplish what the ancient astronaut theorists claim was impossible. In 2014, as mentioned in an earlier chapter, physicists demonstrated that wetting sand reduces friction enough to allow relatively small teams to move heavy stones on sledges. In 2018, researchers in Egypt successfully moved a multi-ton block using only wooden sledges, ropes, and human labor, following techniques depicted in ancient Egyptian art. The astronomical alignments that ancient astronaut theorists cite as evidence of alien knowledge can be explained by careful observation and mathematical knowledge that ancient peoples demonstrably possessed. The Egyptians were skilled astronomers who tracked the movements of stars and planets over generations. The precision of the pyramid's alignment with cardinal directions, while impressive, was achievable through patient observation. Of stellar movements, no alien assistance required. Let's consider another aspect of the ancient astronaut theory that troubles scholars: its implicit dismissal of human capability and achievement. When proponents argue that ancient peoples could not have built the pyramids without help, they are essentially arguing that our ancestors were less intelligent, less capable, and less innovative than we are. This perspective, many archaeologists note, is not only unsupported by evidence, but also disrespectful to the achievements of ancient civilizations. The ancient Egyptians were not primitive people stumbling in the dark. They were sophisticated, intelligent humans who developed complex systems of mathematics, engineering, organization, and administration. They created a stable state that endured for thousands of years. They developed writing, medicine, astronomy, and art. The pyramids are impressive not because they're inexplicable, but because they represent the pinnacle of what human beings can achieve through knowledge, organization, and sustained effort. The appeal of ancient astronaut theories reveals something interesting about contemporary culture. We live in an age of rapid technological change where new capabilities emerge constantly. Perhaps it's natural to project our own experience of technological advancement onto the past, assuming that any impressive achievement must have required advanced technology. The ancient astronaut theory offers a simple explanation for things that seem complex rather than understanding the gradual development of human knowledge and capability. It attributes achievement to external intervention. There's also an element of wonder and mystery that the theory provides. The idea that we've been visited by alien civilizations, that ancient monuments encode messages from the stars, is exciting and romantic. It transforms ancient history into science fiction, making it more dramatic and mysterious than the reality of human achievement through hard work and ingenuity. However, this romanticization comes at a cost. It obscures the real story of the pyramids, which is in many ways more impressive than any alien intervention theory. The pyramids represent what humans can accomplish when knowledge accumulates across generations, when societies organize effectively, when leaders commit resources to ambitious projects, and when workers apply skill and effort over many years. This is a story about us, about human potential, human creativity, and human achievement. The scientific community's rejection of ancient astronaut theories is not about close-mindedness or refusing to consider alternative explanations. It's about requiring evidence, about building understanding on verifiable facts, and about respecting the capabilities of our ancestors. The pyramids don't need aliens to be remarkable. They are remarkable precisely because they were built by human beings using human knowledge, human organization, and human labor. The ancient astronaut theory, despite its lack of scientific support, continues to have cultural influence. It appears regularly in popular media, and surveys suggest that a significant percentage of people find it at least plausible. This persistence suggests that the theory fulfills certain psychological needs: for mystery, for connection to something larger than ourselves, for simple explanations of complex phenomena. But the real mystery of the pyramids is not whether aliens built them. The real mystery is how human civilization developed the knowledge, organization, and motivation to create such monuments. That mystery is being solved gradually through careful archaeological work, through the discovery of new evidence, and through the patient reconstruction of ancient Egyptian society and capabilities. The answers that emerge from this work are more nuanced and complex than alien intervention, but they're also more meaningful because they tell us something true about ourselves and our history. Latest findings. Beyond the debates about ancient astronauts and curses, archaeological work continues to reveal new information about the pyramids' discoveries that are reshaping our understanding of these ancient monuments. The 21st century has brought remarkable advances in technology that allow researchers to study the pyramids in ways previous generations could never have imagined. These new tools, from satellite imaging to particle physics to DNA analysis, are providing answers to long-standing questions while simultaneously revealing how much remains to be discovered. The discovery we've already discussed, the Diary of Merer, found in 2013 at Wadi al-Jarf, represents one of the most significant documentary finds related to the pyramids in decades. These papyrus scrolls, dating to the reign of Khufu himself, provide the first contemporary written account of pyramid construction logistics. But the diary's significance extends beyond its content. Its discovery demonstrated that written records from the Pyramid Age can still be found preserved in Egypt's dry climate, waiting in places that haven't yet been thoroughly explored. 2 years later, in 2015, archaeologists working near the Great Pyramid made another significant discovery: the remains of an ancient harbor system. The excavation, led by Pierre Talla and a team from the French Institute of Oriental Archaeology, revealed a complex of basins, channels, and docks that had been used to bring construction materials to the pyramid site. The harbor system confirmed what the Diary of Merer had described, that boats played a crucial role in transporting stone, particularly during the Nile's annual flood, when water levels were high enough to navigate channels that would be dry the rest of the year. The harbor discovery included evidence of the infrastructure that supported it: storage facilities, workshops, and administrative buildings. Analysis of the site revealed that it had been carefully planned and constructed with channels dug to specific depths and widths to accommodate boats of certain sizes. This level of planning reinforces our understanding of the pyramid project as a massive, carefully organized undertaking that required sophisticated logistics and administration. Let's consider the technological advances that have opened new windows into the pyramids. In 2015, the Scan Pyramids project began using multiple non-invasive technologies to study the internal structure of the pyramids. Beyond the muon radiography that detected the large void in 2017, the project has employed thermal imaging to map temperature variations across the pyramid's surface. Thermal imaging works on the principle that different materials and structures retain and release heat at different rates. By photographing the pyramid with infrared cameras at different times of day and in different seasons, researchers can detect subtle temperature differences that might indicate voids, different types of stone, or variations in the pyramid's internal structure. In 2016, the Scan Pyramids team reported several thermal anomalies on the Great Pyramid's surface areas that heated and cooled at different rates than surrounding stone. These anomalies could indicate hidden chambers, passages, or simply variations in the stone's density and composition. Further investigation is needed to determine their significance. Another technology that has proven valuable is LiDAR light detection and ranging. This system uses laser pulses to create extremely detailed, three-dimensional maps of surfaces and structures. In 2018, a LiDAR survey of the Giza Plateau revealed features that had gone unnoticed despite centuries of study. The survey detected the remains of ancient roads and pathways, the foundations of structures that had long since disappeared, and subtle variations in the plateau's surface that suggested buried features. The LiDAR data showed that the area around the pyramids was far more developed and complex than previously understood. There were networks of roads connecting different parts of the site areas that appeared to have been workshops or storage facilities, and evidence of careful landscape modification. This discovery reinforces the understanding that the pyramids were not isolated monuments, but the centerpieces of extensive complexes that included temples, causeways, workers' settlements, and administrative facilities. Ground-penetrating radar has also contributed to new discoveries. This technology sends radio waves into the ground and measures how they're reflected back, creating images of subsurface features. In 2021, researchers from Cairo University used ground-penetrating radar to survey the area beneath the Giza Plateau. Their data suggested the presence of what might be a network of tunnels or passages connecting different parts of the site. These potential tunnels, if they exist, could have served various purposes, perhaps as underground passages for priests, as drainage systems, or as part of the construction infrastructure. The interpretation of ground-penetrating radar data is complex, and the researchers emphasized that further investigation would be needed to confirm the nature of the anomalies they detected. But the possibility of an underground network at Giza adds another layer to our understanding of the site's complexity. DNA analysis has opened yet another avenue of research. In 2022, a study examined DNA extracted from the remains of workers buried near the pyramids. The analysis revealed that these workers came from various regions across Egypt, not just from the local area around Giza. This finding supports the interpretation that pyramid construction was a national project drawing labor and resources from throughout the kingdom. The genetic diversity among the workers also suggests that the workforce included people from different social and economic backgrounds, consistent with the evidence that pyramid building involved both skilled craftsmen and rotating crews of seasonal workers. Advances in radiocarbon dating technology have also contributed to our understanding. Traditional radiocarbon dating of the pyramids has been challenging because the stones themselves can't be dated. They're far older than the pyramids. But organic materials found in the mortar between stones or charcoal from fires used by workers can be dated. New techniques allow for more precise dating of smaller samples, and recent studies have been refining our understanding of the pyramid's construction timeline. One study published in 2020 used radiocarbon dating of organic material from the Great Pyramid to suggest that construction might have taken place over a shorter period than traditionally estimated, perhaps 20 years, rather than the 23 years mentioned by ancient historians. However, other researchers have questioned this interpretation, noting the complexities of interpreting radiocarbon dates from such ancient samples. The debate illustrates how new technologies provide new data, but interpreting that data still requires careful analysis and discussion. Satellite imagery has also proven valuable, particularly for understanding the broader landscape context of the pyramids. High-resolution satellite photos have revealed ancient roads, quarries, and settlements that are difficult to detect from ground level. In some cases, these images have guided archaeologists to new excavation sites, leading to discoveries that fill in gaps in our understanding of how the pyramid complex functioned. One particularly interesting application of satellite technology involves analyzing how the Nile River's course has changed over millennia. The river's position relative to the pyramids has shifted significantly since ancient times, and understanding these changes helps researchers understand how materials were transported and how the ancient landscape differed from what we see today. Let's consider what these recent discoveries collectively reveal. Each new technology provides a different perspective on the pyramids, like different instruments in an orchestra contributing to a fuller understanding of the composition. Muon radiography reveals large-scale internal structures. Thermal imaging detects subtle variations in the pyramid's surface. LiDAR maps the surrounding landscape with unprecedented detail. Ground-penetrating radar probes beneath the surface. DNA analysis reveals information about the people who built the pyramids, and radiocarbon dating helps establish more precise timelines. Together, these technologies are creating a more complete picture of the pyramids and the society that built them. They're confirming some long-held theories, such as the use of water transport and the involvement of workers from across Egypt, while also revealing unexpected features and raising new questions. The pace of discovery shows no signs of slowing. New technologies continue to be developed, and existing technologies continue to be refined and applied in new ways. Each year brings new findings, new data, and new insights. Some discoveries answer old questions. Others reveal that our questions were too simple, that the reality is more complex and interesting than we had imagined. What's particularly notable about recent discoveries is how they demonstrate the value of interdisciplinary research. Understanding the pyramids now requires not just archaeologists and Egyptologists, but also physicists, engineers, geneticists, climate scientists, and specialists in remote sensing and data analysis. The pyramids have become a meeting point for multiple fields of study, each contributing its expertise to unraveling the monument's mysteries. These discoveries also remind us that the pyramids still have secrets to reveal. After more than 4,000 years, after centuries of study, after the application of the most advanced technologies available, we're still finding new features, still refining our understanding, still being surprised by what these ancient structures can teach us. The pyramids remain, in a very real sense, a frontier of discovery, ancient monuments that continue to challenge and reward modern investigation. The work continues. Researchers are planning new surveys, new excavations, new applications of technology. Each discovery, each new piece of data adds to our understanding, while often revealing how much more there is to learn. The pyramids stand as they have for millennia, patient and enduring, gradually yielding their secrets to those who study them, with care, respect, and the best tools that modern science can provide. Unsolved Mysteries. We've explored the recent discoveries that continue to reshape our understanding of the pyramids. Now, as our journey draws to a close, let's consider what remains unknown, the mysteries that persist despite centuries of study and decades of technological advancement. The Great Pyramid has stood on the Giza Plateau for more than 4,500 years. It has been studied, measured, explored, and analyzed by countless scholars across multiple civilizations. It has been examined with technologies ranging from simple measuring rods to cosmic ray detectors. Yet for all we have learned, fundamental questions remain unanswered. These enduring mysteries are not failures of scholarship, but reminders of the pyramid's complexity and the limits of what we can know about the distant past. Consider the subterranean chamber carved into the bedrock beneath the pyramid. This rough, unfinished space raises immediate questions. Why was it left incomplete? The chamber shows clear signs of work tool marks on the walls, a shaft descending further into the rock, but the work appears to have been abandoned. One theory suggests this was the original burial chamber and that plans changed during the construction, leading to the creation of the Queen's Chamber and ultimately the King's Chamber higher in the pyramid. But if this is true, why begin carving a chamber deep beneath the pyramid? And why not finish it, or at least make it presentable, even if it was no longer to be used for burial? Another possibility is that the subterranean chamber was always meant to remain unfinished, serving some symbolic purpose in Egyptian religious belief. The chamber's location, deep in the bedrock, might represent the underworld, the realm of the dead, deliberately left rough and dark in contrast to the finished chambers above. But no texts clearly support this interpretation, and we're left with speculation based on what we think we understand about Egyptian cosmology. The narrow shafts extending from the Queen's Chamber present their own puzzle. We know they exist, we know they're blocked by stone doors with copper fittings, and we know that behind the first doors are small spaces and second doors. But we don't know where they ultimately lead, what they contain, or what purpose they served. Were they symbolic pathways for the Pharaoh's spirit? Were they related to construction? Were they meant to be opened, or were they always intended to remain sealed? The shafts from the King's Chamber reach the pyramid's exterior and align with significant stars, suggesting a religious purpose. But the Queen's Chamber shafts don't reach the exterior and were hidden behind the wall surface. Their purpose remains unclear. The large void detected by muon radiography in 2017 represents perhaps the most tantalizing current mystery. We know it exists. 3 independent teams confirmed its presence using different technologies. We know approximately where it is above the Grand Gallery, and we know it's substantial in size, at least 30 meters long. But we don't know its shape, its contents, or its purpose. Is it a deliberate chamber, a construction feature? A series of smaller spaces that appear as one large void in the muon data. Until we can examine it directly, we can only speculate. Let's consider another puzzling aspect of the Great Pyramid, the absence of decoration. Most Egyptian tombs, particularly royal tombs, are covered with hieroglyphic inscriptions and painted scenes depicting the deceased, the gods and religious texts meant to aid the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. The walls of later pyramids from the 5th and 6th dynasties are covered with pyramid texts, spells, and incantations carved into the stone. But the chambers of the Great Pyramid are bare. The walls are smooth, undecorated stone. The only inscriptions found are the workers' marks in the relieving chambers above the King's Chamber graffiti, never meant to be seen, hidden in spaces that were sealed during construction. Why this absence of decoration? Some scholars suggest that the 4th dynasty, when the Great Pyramid was built, predated the tradition of decorating burial chambers with religious texts. But other tombs from the same period do contain inscriptions and decorations. Was the Great Pyramid's bareness intentional, reflecting a different religious understanding? Or were there decorations that have been lost, perhaps painted on surfaces that have since deteriorated, or on materials that were removed in antiquity? The granite sarcophagus in the king's chamber raises its own questions. It sits empty without a lid, showing signs of damage. Was it ever used? If Khufu was buried here, what happened to his mummy? The pyramid was certainly entered in ancient times. The granite plugs blocking the ascending passage were bypassed. The chambers were accessed. Was the burial disturbed by ancient tomb robbers? Or was the pharaoh never buried here at all? Some researchers have suggested that the true burial might be in an undiscovered chamber, with the king's chamber serving as a decoy. But this theory lacks supporting evidence. The precision of the pyramid's construction continues to puzzle researchers. The base is level to within 2 centimeters. The sides align with the cardinal directions to within a few arc minutes. The blocks fit together with remarkable tightness. How was this precision achieved with the tools available to the ancient Egyptians? We have theories: careful astronomical observation for alignment, water-filled trenches for leveling, skilled craftsmanship for stone fitting. But we don't have detailed ancient accounts of the methods used, and some aspects of the construction remain difficult to fully explain, even with our understanding of ancient Egyptian capabilities. Looking toward the future, researchers are planning new investigations using advancing technologies. Sarah Parcak, a space archaeologist who uses satellite imagery to locate archaeological sites, believes that artificial intelligence and machine learning will help identify subtle features that human observers might miss. By training AI systems to recognize patterns associated with ancient structures, researchers might discover features at Giza that have gone unnoticed, despite the site's intensive study. Zahi Hawass has proposed a new exploration of the large void detected in 2017 using miniature robots, even smaller than those used to explore the shafts from the Queen's chamber. These robots, equipped with high-resolution cameras and sensors, might be able to access the void through existing cracks or passages, providing the first direct observations of this mysterious space. Other researchers are developing new applications of existing technologies. More sensitive muon detectors might reveal smaller voids or provide more detailed information about the large void structure. Advanced ground-penetrating radar might map subsurface features with greater precision. New methods of analyzing ancient DNA might reveal more about the workers who built the pyramid and the society they came from. But even as we anticipate future discoveries, we must acknowledge a fundamental truth. Some questions may never be answered with certainty. The ancient Egyptians left no detailed construction manual, no comprehensive explanation of the pyramid's symbolic meaning, no clear statement of why certain design choices were made. The knowledge was passed through practice and oral tradition, and much of it was lost when the Old Kingdom collapsed and the age of pyramid building ended. This uncertainty is not a failure, but a feature of historical inquiry. We work with incomplete evidence, trying to reconstruct events and intentions from material remains and fragmentary texts. We build theories based on what we find, but we must remain open to new evidence that might require us to revise our understanding. The pyramid's mysteries remind us to be humble about what we claim to know and curious about what remains to be discovered. What's particularly interesting is how each answer generates new questions. When we discovered the large void, we gained new knowledge. There's a significant space within the pyramid that wasn't previously known. But this discovery immediately raised questions. What is it? Why is it there? What does it contain? Are there other voids we haven't detected? Each piece of the puzzle we place reveals gaps where other pieces should be. Perhaps this is the Great Pyramid's most profound legacy, not what it reveals, but what it continues to conceal. In an age when we can map distant galaxies and sequence genomes, when information seems infinitely accessible and mysteries appear to be vanishing, The pyramid stands as a reminder that some things remain unknown. It challenges us to keep questioning, keep investigating, keep applying new methods and new perspectives to old problems. The pyramid invites each generation to engage with it, anew to bring their tools and their questions, to add their observations to the accumulated knowledge of centuries. It has survived the civilization that built it, outlasted the languages in which its builders spoke, and endured through the rise and fall of countless empires. And through all this time it has maintained its mysteries, yielding its secrets, slowly, never, completely, always leaving more to discover. This quality, the ability to remain mysterious while revealing just enough to keep us engaged, may be the pyramid's greatest achievement. It stands not just as a monument to a long-dead pharaoh, but as an enduring invitation to wonder, to question, and to seek understanding. In a world that often feels fully explored and completely explained, the Great Pyramid reminds us that mystery still exists, that the past still has secrets to share, and that the human drive to understand and explore remains as vital today as it was when the first scholars began to study this ancient monument. The pyramid will stand long after we are gone, waiting for future generations to bring their questions and their technologies to add their discoveries to the long story of human engagement with this extraordinary structure. And it will continue as it has for more than 4 millennia to inspire wonder, to challenge understanding, and to remind us of what human beings can achieve when vision and knowledge and determination align. Eternal heritage. We've explored the mysteries that remain unsolved. Now, in our final chapter, let's consider the pyramid's enduring influence, how a monument built for one pharaoh's eternal rest has become a symbol for all of humanity. The Great Pyramid's impact extends far beyond archaeology and ancient history. For more than 4 millennia, it has captured human imagination, influenced architecture and art, and served as a symbol of human achievement and ambition. Its influence can be traced through successive civilizations, each interpreting the pyramid through their own cultural lens, each finding in it something that speaks to their own values and their aspirations. In ancient times, the pyramid was already recognized as extraordinary. When Greek scholars compiled their list of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, sometime around the 2nd century BCE, the Great Pyramid was included alongside the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the Colossus of Rhodes, and the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Of these 7 wonders, only the Great Pyramid survives today. The others have been destroyed by earthquakes, fires, or the passage of time. The pyramid endures. Greek and Roman travelers visited the pyramids, marveling at their scale and antiquity. Herodotus, the Greek historian who visited Egypt around 450 BCE, wrote descriptions of the pyramids that, while not always accurate, conveyed his sense of wonder. By his time, the pyramids were already ancient, as distant in time from Herodotus as Herodotus is from us. Roman tourists carved graffiti on the pyramid stones, leaving evidence of their visits that can still be seen today. When Arab scholars and travelers encountered the pyramids after the Islamic conquest of Egypt in the 7th century CE, they too were impressed. Arab historians wrote treatises attempting to explain the pyramids' purpose and construction. Some believed they were repositories of ancient knowledge, built to preserve wisdom from before a great flood. Others saw them as astronomical observatories or treasure houses. These interpretations, while not accurate by modern archaeological standards, reflect the pyramid's ability to inspire speculation and wonder. Let's consider a specific moment that illustrates the pyramid's impact on European imagination. In July 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte arrived in Egypt with a military expedition. On July 21st, before the Battle of the Pyramids, Napoleon reportedly addressed his troops, soldiers from the summit of these pyramids. 40 centuries look down upon you. Whether he actually spoke these words is debated by historians, but the quote captures how the pyramids had come to symbolize the weight of history, the achievements of past civilizations, and the challenge of living up to the accomplishments of those who came before. Napoleon's expedition included not just soldiers, but also scholars, the savants who would study Egypt's monuments and produce the monumental Description de l'Egypte. This work, published between 1809 and 1829, brought detailed knowledge of Egyptian antiquities to Europe and sparked an intense interest in ancient Egypt that came to be called Egyptomania. The pyramid became a popular motif in European art, architecture, and design. In the 19th century, as Egyptology emerged as a scientific discipline, the pyramid became a subject of serious scholarly study, but it also continued to inspire imaginative interpretations. Some saw mathematical mysteries encoded in its dimensions. Others proposed astronomical or religious significance. The pyramid became a kind of Rorschach test onto which people projected their own interests and beliefs. The pyramid's influence on architecture has been substantial and enduring. Pyramid forms appear in buildings around the world, from the Pyramid of Cestius in Rome, built around 12 BCE, to modern structures like the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas or the Louvre Pyramid in Paris. The Louvre Pyramid, designed by architect I.M. Pei and completed in 1989, demonstrates how the pyramid form continues to resonate. Pei's glass pyramid serves as the main entrance to the Louvre Museum, a modern structure in dialogue with one of Europe's most historic buildings. The pyramid's clean geometric form, its sense of permanence and monumentality, made it an effective symbol for the museum's renovation and modernization. In design and branding, the pyramid appears frequently as a symbol of stability, permanence, and achievement. Corporate logos, organizational charts, and educational frameworks often use pyramid imagery to convey hierarchy, foundation, or aspiration. The pyramid has become a universal visual language recognized across cultures. The pyramid's influence extends into popular culture as well. It appears in films, novels, video games, and television shows, often associated with mystery, ancient wisdom, or hidden power. While these fictional representations often bear little resemblance to archaeological reality, they demonstrate the pyramid's continued hold on popular imagination. The pyramid has become more than a historical monument. It's a cultural icon, a symbol that carries meanings beyond its original purpose. Let's consider what modern engineers and architects learn from studying the pyramid. The structure demonstrates principles of load distribution, material efficiency, and long-term stability that remain relevant today. The pyramid's shape, broad at the base, tapering toward the top, is inherently stable, distributing weight effectively. Modern engineers studying earthquake-resistant design have examined how the pyramid's mass and geometry contribute to its stability. The organizational achievement represented by the pyramid's construction also continues to be studied. Project managers and organizational theorists examine how the ancient Egyptians coordinated thousands of workers or managed resources, maintained quality control, and completed a multi-decade project. The pyramid stands as evidence that large-scale, complex projects can be successfully executed with clear planning, effective organization, and sustained commitment. In education, the pyramid serves multiple purposes. It's a gateway to learning about ancient history, archaeology, engineering, and mathematics. Students around the world study the pyramids, learning not just about ancient Egypt, but about how we investigate the past, how we interpret evidence, and how civilizations develop and express their values through monumental architecture. Each year, millions of people visit the Giza Plateau. They come from every continent, speaking dozens of languages, representing countless cultures. They stand before the pyramid, look up at its massive stone faces, and experience a moment of connection with the distant past. For many visitors, seeing the pyramid in person is a profound experience, a confrontation with human mortality and human achievement, with the passage of time and the persistence of human creativity. The pyramid has become a symbol of Egypt itself, appearing on currency, in tourism materials, and in countless representations of Egyptian identity. But it's also become a symbol that transcends national boundaries, a monument that belongs, in a sense, to all of humanity. It represents what human beings can achieve when they commit to ambitious goals, when they organize effectively, when they apply knowledge and skill over sustained periods. The pyramid also raises questions about legacy and permanence. In our contemporary world, where change seems constant and accelerating, where buildings are demolished, after decades rather than standing for millennia, the pyramid asks us to think about what endures. What are we building today that will still stand in 4,000 years? What values are we expressing through our architecture and our monuments? What will future generations make of our achievements and our priorities? These questions are not merely philosophical. They touch on practical concerns about sustainability, about building for the long term, rather than the immediate, about considering the impact of our actions on distant future generations. The pyramid built to last forever challenges our culture's tendency toward planned obsolescence and short-term thinking. The pyramid also reminds us of the human capacity for wonder. In an age of remarkable technological achievement, when we've sent spacecraft beyond our solar system and can manipulate individual atoms, the pyramid still has the power to impress and inspire. Its scale, its precision, its age, these qualities combine to create something that transcends rational analysis and touches something deeper in human consciousness. Standing before the Great Pyramid, one confronts the reality of human mortality and human achievement in the same moment. The pyramid was built by people who lived and died more than 4,000 years ago. Their individual names are mostly lost to history, but their collective achievement endures, a testament to what humans can accomplish together. The pyramid stands as evidence that we are capable of creating things that outlast us, that speak across the centuries, that connect us to people we will never meet, but with whom we share a common humanity. In a world that often feels fragmented, where differences between cultures and peoples are emphasized, the pyramid serves as a reminder of what unites us. Every culture that has encountered it has recognized its significance. Every generation has found something meaningful in its presence. The pyramid speaks a universal language, the language of human ambition, human creativity, and human persistence. As we conclude our exploration of the Great Pyramid, we're left not with final answers, but with deepened appreciation. We've learned about the workers who built it, the techniques they used, the society that organized their efforts. We've explored its chambers and passages, its astronomical alignments, its mathematical properties. We've examined the legends that have grown around it, and the scientific investigations that continue to reveal its secrets. And through all of this, we've encountered a monument that refuses to be fully explained, that maintains its mysteries, even as it yields its secrets. The Great Pyramid stands as it has for more than 4 millennia, weathered, but enduring, mysterious yet knowable, ancient yet relevant. It challenges us to think about what we're building, what we're creating, what legacy we're leaving. It invites us to wonder, to question, to investigate. And it reminds us that human beings working together with vision and determination can create things that transcend their own lifetimes and speak to the ages. In the end, perhaps, that is the pyramid's greatest lesson, not about ancient Egypt, but about ourselves. It shows us what we're capable of. It demonstrates that human achievement can endure across vast stretches of time. And it suggests that the things we create with care, skill, and purpose can outlast empires, survive the collapse of civilizations, and continue to inspire wonder in people who live in worlds we cannot imagine. The pyramid stands, and in standing, it speaks not in words, but in stone, about the enduring power of human creativity and the timeless human desire to build something that will last. Over the past 2.5 hours, we've journeyed through more than 4,000 years of history, exploring one of humanity's most enduring monuments. We began with Pharaoh Khufu's vision and the decision to build something unprecedented. We traced the origins of millions of limestone blocks, quarried from the Giza plateau and transported from distant Aswan. We met the workers, not slaves, but organized teams of skilled craftsmen and seasonal laborers, fed well and cared for, taking pride in their contribution to something eternal. We examined the engineering challenges, how stones were moved, how ramps might have been constructed, how precision was achieved with copper tools and careful observation. We discovered the astronomical knowledge embedded in the pyramid's design, its alignment with the stars and the cardinal directions. We ventured inside through narrow passages to chambers whose purposes still provoke debate. We explored the mysterious shafts with their blocking stones and copper fittings, and the large void detected only recently by cosmic ray imaging. We confronted the legends that have grown around the pyramids, the curse of the pharaohs, born from coincidence and journalistic imagination, and the ancient astronaut theories that, while captivating, diminish the real achievements of ancient Egyptian civilization. And we've seen how modern technology continues to reveal new information, harbor systems workers, DNA thermal anomalies, and subsurface features that suggest the Giza Plateau holds secrets still waiting to be discovered. What emerges from this exploration is a picture far more complex and interesting than simple narratives of alien intervention or enslaved masses. The Great Pyramid represents human organization at a scale rarely achieved, human ingenuity applied to seemingly impossible challenges, and human determination sustained over decades. It stands as evidence of what our species can accomplish when knowledge accumulates across generations, when societies commit resources to ambitious goals, and when workers apply skill and effort toward a shared vision. The pyramid matters not just as an archaeological site or an engineering marvel, but as a mirror in which we see ourselves. It asks us to think about legacy, what we're building, what will endure, what future generations will make of our achievements. In an age of rapid change and planned obsolescence, the pyramid stands as a reminder that humans can create things meant to last forever. Things that speak across millennia to people living in worlds unimaginably different from those of the creators. History is not a fixed story, but an ongoing conversation between past and present. Each generation brings new questions, new technologies, new perspectives to ancient monuments. The pyramid has been studied for centuries, yet it revealed a major internal void only in 2017. It continues to surprise us, to challenge our assumptions, to reward careful investigation with new insights. The mysteries that remain, the unfinished chamber, the blocked shafts, the absence of decoration, remind us that some questions may never be fully answered, and that uncertainty is not a failure, but an invitation to continued inquiry. We study the past not just to understand what happened, but to understand ourselves, to see the long arc of human development, to recognize patterns that repeat across cultures and eras, to find inspiration in the achievements of those who came before us. The pyramid connects us to people we will never meet, whose names are mostly lost, but whose work endures. It reminds us that we are part of something larger than our individual lives, part of a human story that stretches back thousands of years and will continue long after we're gone. There is something profound in standing before a monument that has outlasted empires, survived the collapse of the civilization that built it, and continues to inspire wonder in an age of space travel and quantum physics. The pyramid speaks to something fundamental in human nature, our desire to create, to build, to leave something behind that matters. It challenges us to think beyond our own lifetimes, to consider what we're contributing to the long human story. Thank you for joining this journey through ancient Egypt and the enduring mystery of the pyramids. May the questions we've explored tonight linger gently in your thoughts, and may the achievements of those ancient builders remind you of what humans can accomplish when vision, knowledge, and determination align. Rest well knowing that the pyramid stands as it has for more than 4 millennia, patient and enduring, waiting for tomorrow's discoveries and tomorrow's questions. Good night.